Hello, everyone. Welcome to BRAP. It is Wednesday, September the 10th, and we're back at a regular schedule time. We had BRAP last Friday. I was actually out of town on, actually last Wednesday. I had to go on a quick work trip down to Orlando, Florida for about 24 hours and then flew back. Not a long flight, about an hour and 45 minutes from where I live. So not too bad, but great to be back again this Wednesday night. Have a lot to talk about. We'll be discussing yet again, exclusivity and how some influencers in particular, we have a video clip that we're going to share a bit later about two influencers in particular that are, again, running with the idea that exclusives are going away, or that they could see Nintendo even maybe going multi-plat. So I think it's important, and we had this conversation last Friday, last weekend, Saturday. I think we had this conversation on Saturday as well. I think I did like back-to-back BRAPs. But I think it's important to have this conversation to add a layer of nuance to the conversation, because what I often hear is an oversimplified explanation with a lot of missing variables in the calculus of why exclusivity or why product differentiators are important to ecosystems. I think it's and why they're important to consumers too. Some influencers seem to think that exclusivity doesn't matter to consumers, or they have no value, and that is absolutely 110% false. So we'll get into that later. We'll also discuss some of the games that we're currently playing right now. We'll give you a big PlayStation update and discuss the 1 hour Nintendo Direct, which is coming up on Friday, which I'm kind of excited about. So before we get to those topics, I do want to introduce everyone. We have returning guests. We have the man himself, the financial analyst, probably the smartest man on Twitter. One of the smartest individuals on Twitter, David Falke. And Falke's on a call right now, but I don't know if he can hear us, but he's on a call. I can see him chatting right now. He's probably I think he's talking about financial matters right now. But anyhow, we'll get back to Falcon. We also have another individual here who did a great job today, by the way. Maybe was it today or yesterday? Putting together some important data as it relates to exclusivity and the impact that exclusivity has had on the PlayStation ecosystem. We have Nib with us. Nib,
yo,
welcome back to BRAP.
You good? You good? I forgot. Yeah, I was playing Silksong, but I don't think I can play this and talk at the same time.
You might not. The way
this game is, a bit too, maybe a bit too frustrating for that.
Yeah, no, I heard you when you joined the
Xbox controller is so clackety. Listen, it's so noisy.
Yeah, it sounds like you're typing on a keyboard.
Literally.
Yeah. But no, Nib, welcome back to BRAP. Glad you could join us, because you did have some great data to share with us. You actually, and you also, by the way, what I thought was great about your tweet that I'll share a little bit later is that you dispelled of this narrative that's been out there for some time about bundles being counted. Matt Piscatella from Circana was able to confirm that for you, which is really important, because there's often that narrative that people try to minimize the impact and be dismissive of the impact, the sales impact.
The funny thing is, even though I asked, I actually did not need to, because in the all-time sales charts that he shared, he actually said already at the bottom in asterisks that bundle sales are not counted. But people don't read, or they crop that stuff out, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah, I don't think people read. I think people get their information from people get their information from podcasters like Boomstick, Cold Eastwood. And it's like, understand that those individuals have agendas, they have narratives. They want to get clicks and views, and so they're going to say things to drive that emotional viewership, get people up, get them foaming at the mouths and look, that's their prerogative, but we don't do that here on this show.
No,
that's what they.
I really dislike that in general, because the thing is, like, sometimes you have to separate your confirmation bias or your preference with the data, right? Like, there might be things that I don't necessarily agree with, like maybe that PlayStation does or Nintendo does with their pricing or whatever, with their releases or with amiibos or whatever, but you can't reject the data. Like, I may not like certain practices, but if it's making them money, or if it's doing this, or if it's doing that, it's distinguishing from a consumer perspective and the reality of the business side of things, right? Like, it doesn't, just because you're sharing data, it doesn't mean you necessarily agree with every business decision that's made. You're literally just a conduit for the facts and analysis. So I think some people, they almost cannot separate the two. Like, and maybe it's a tribalistic thing. Like, I hear people, even people were saying to me when I'm sharing information from, I think recently we had a slew of executives on the Xbox side who, were giving their opinions about Game Pass and, viability, or I should say the impact to creators from a first party sense. And, I shared that, and there was a lot of people who were like, "Oh, aren't you a Game Pass user?" But that literally has no relevance to me sharing factual information from people inside the industry. Like, it's not the case that because I use Game Pass, I can never say or share anything anyone has to say about it if it might be negative. Like, that's a tribalistic way of looking at things and of life in general. That is not how you should behave. Like, you should always be open-minded to viewpoints or other, perspectives, especially if data and information is against what you already know or believe. Like, the whole point of information is to inform you, right? But it almost feels like people would prefer not to be informed if it doesn't conform to their preferred narrative.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's a great point, but yeah, Falky, I don't know if you're back.
I am here.
All right, so I gave you a big welcome introduction to the show, but great to have you back, Falky. And it's great seeing you, because that means we made it to Thursday. We're in the future. Well, you're in the future, I should say. I'm in the past. But welcome, Falky. It's great to see you.
Yes. Great to be here. Thank you for having me back. Be here for a short period because I've got some other stuff that I've got to crack on with. But yeah, no, it's good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Hold on, gentlemen. Hold on just a sec here. Give me a second here. I'm actually sending a work email out real quick. Believe it or not.
What is it to do with? Let's get some insight into your work.
Well, I did mention, I don't know if you were here when Falky was on. I mentioned that one of my clients is actually a big video game publisher, a very big game publisher. That I'll drop a hint. They release one of the yearly release of one of the biggest franchises in video games right now. So I'll leave it at that.
Is there a lot of violence in it?
There may or may not be. I won't confirm that, but I will say that it is not a sports game.
No. Well, I think that narrows it down enough.
Yeah. So yeah, people could. Yeah, people. I'm sure many people will be able to guess who.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry. That's why I gotta hold on a sec here.
Anyway,
all right. Sorry about that. Yeah. So all right, I do want to get to. It's so funny. It's actually really cool when I was informed today about this client that I'll be working with. I was like, oh, really? I was, and actually, they're not the only large publisher that we work with. There's actually quite a few publishers that we work with. One of them I could tell you is behind a certain PC storefront that is not Steam. Yeah. So
it's interesting in life because obviously gaming is so massive now that you can tend to have connections just through work or for a family or whatever. Because one of my relatives was actually high up in a AAA developer. Again, I won't give out any information, but they used to throw me freebies here and now and again. That was good. But yeah, it's interesting speaking to like family who's in development and stuff about this stuff, because obviously you can be a bit more candid. But yeah, I will say no more.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So I do want to go to what everyone's playing right now. So Nib, you joined the show. I heard the controller buttons hitting, clicking, maybe the right trigger button clicking.
Yeah. Brad was
so
like, "Why are you abusing your Xbox controller?
Well,
Are you that much of a fanboy?"
I thought you were playing on PC. But I was like, maybe he's playing a PC game, hitting the keyboard.
Nah, Silksong. I'm playing Silksong on the Xbox Series X through Game Pass.
And what are your thoughts so far of the game?
I love the game, but I have a lot of issues with it too. And I hate this like kind of get good. It's not about that. In fact, I wouldn't say like it's been tremendously difficult. I would say it's more the time consumption that irritates me, because there is was it a run back? I think they call it, is the term. There's a ton of run back, a lot of backtracking. Obviously, these things are kind of like part and parcel of Metroidvanias, but I think here it pushes it a little bit too far. So I'll say the positives first. Like positives, actual fluidity, movement, gameplay mechanics, and diversity of mechanics, and the way they all intertwine and the way they kind of marry with the environment. Unbelievable. Maybe even the best I've ever experienced in a Metroidvania.
Oh, really?
Just,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's just so fluid, frenetic, and the kind of as you learn and master each technique, if you watch someone playing it, even when you're watching yourself, it looks crazy. The moves and the motion and everything you're pulling off is so insane, because you're doing like 5-6 different sort of combinations: diving, gliding, jumping, grappling, boosting, pogoing, like all these other things. But when it kind of becomes ingrained into your muscle memory, the speed and the kind of like fluidity in which you do it, and it all combines together, is crazy. Obviously, like, it depends on how far in the game you are. I'm getting a lot further in the game now. I think I'm on Act 2 or close to. So I have like all the beginning like features, and I think one from Act 2. So yeah, it's really, the way it flows and plays is unbelievable. It has a lot of character, like constant new things, constant new items, constant new abilities. The characters are quirky, the worlds are quirky. It's a little bit dingy for my liking. I think the art style is a bit too dreary, and I prefer sort of like the diversity and vibrancy of, say, like a Ori. Because Ori was a better mix, I thought, of like lush environments and then moody, grimy environments, whereas this is kind of all on the gloomy, moodier side. Even the kind of green areas are still kind of a bit daunting and haunting. But so all of that is amazing. The boss fights impeccable. Like, mechanically, some of them are so fun, and you can see a lot of thought has been put into move sets. And one might test the verticality, one might test your ground, one might test like ads, so your spatial awareness. Like, they've clearly put a lot of thought into that side of things. On the negative side, I think it almost feels like, because so many people, Hollow Knight was like a cult thing, and people gamed the hell out of it and got so good at it. It's like the developers are saying, okay, you guys got so good with this, let's just throw everything in the kitchen sink and see how you fare when we make it much harder. And unfortunately, a lot of that difficulty is not actually with the mechanics, say, of the boss or the challenge or whatever. It's more in the time, like, say, getting to a boss, or like after you die, like the process and the time and the amount of annoying little things that get in your way. And I always see people like, oh yeah, but you see, it's a skill issue. You just got to get good going through it. And yeah, you always do eventually get really fluid and good at going through a run back, but it's still an exercise of time and repetition to kind of learn the ultimate route, learn the optimum route, and which enemies you can easily avoid, how you avoid them, blah blah blah. And for me, that's not respecting the player's time. Like, I shouldn't have to go through 30 seconds to sometimes a minute, whatever, to do a run back. There's some really irritating ones as well. And like, for example, I think it's called Biowater or something. This one area, it's like a poisony area. There, you can't even sort of memorize the positions of the enemies because they're randomized. So even your run back cannot actually be perfectly executed every time because the placement of the enemies is different and they fire poisonous projectiles and all this other nonsense. So stuff like that really frustrates. And there's also tiny little things that I think, like, from a design perspective, maybe they weren't as well thought out. Like, there's one kind of challenge room where you fight tons of crap, like, it's all over the screen, flying ants and bugs and this and that, which is cool. But then you have this NPC which fights with you. I think her name is Chakra, and she fires projectiles and jumps around all over the screen. But it's like, visually, it's just too much. It's too much clutter. It's not a difficulty thing, it's the presentation thing. Like, she's running around throwing projectiles. There's 2-3 enemies running around throwing projectiles. There's ground enemies running around throwing projectiles, and it's just too busy to keep up with everything that's going on. And so in that situation, it's not that your skill is lacking or whatever, it's just that you physically can't see what's going on the screen. There's too much visual clutter. So little things like that, I feel like just could have done with a bit more refinement. But yeah, overall, I would say, like, still a phenomenal game. Just needs little tweaks here and there. And I know a lot of the, because I'm not in Act 3 yet, so I can't really say, but I've heard a lot of people who are further in the game, close to completion, they've complained that the double damage that basically everything in the game does, it becomes too frustrating later on, because every little nick and cranny, that even just touching an enemy or touching a spike or something, will take off 2 of your health when you only have like 6 or 7 or whatever. So it can be real frustrating. But overall, yeah, phenomenal because of all the mechanics and stuff. But just needs some balancing tweaks.
All right, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that insight, sharing your experience with Hollow Knight Silksong. I appreciate that, Nib. What about you, Falky? Is there anything in particular you're playing right now?
Working through Death Stranding 1. Finding it to be a bit tedious at the moment, if I'm being honest. I'm about halfway, or past halfway. I think I'm up to chapter 7 or 8. It's got some interesting parts to it, but it's just starting to become repetitive. And I'm sort of trying to push hard just to get through the story and then see how I feel after that. But
How many?
yeah, I mean,
how far are you in the game, Falky? Like, how many hours do you know?
65, something like that.
Oh wow, okay.
I'm just at the second battle with Clifford. Can't remember his friggin' name now.
Yeah.
I'm just finding it, like, some of the, I'm not sure what happened. There was an update that came through a couple of weeks ago, and the controls for the vehicles and the controls for the character, for Sam himself, they've become ridiculously cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to God, when I finish this game, if I have to drive over another rock in another game, I'm going to throw a controller. It drives me nuts. And he'll stumble on flat ground. Trying to do this gunfight last night with Clifford was just ferociously annoying because I had nothing on his back, doing it light on purpose. And having a heap of, the power skeleton and power gloves and a heap of other stuff. So he should be able to just get around and not fall over, but just walking along flat ground, and then next thing he stumbles and he's on his face, and it's frustrating. He'll start running when he's on level ground and then trip over. I was just like, I'm not
Yeah.
playing Octodad. Like, come on, this is nuts. So, and it feels very intentionally difficult when it shouldn't be. and I just don't have the patience for it. But
It's
then,
really.
yeah.
No, sorry. You carry on. I'll chime in afterwards. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's just like I'm enjoying where the story's going and some of the premises around it. It's definitely a Kojima game, but it's like it just feels like it's becoming a chore, and I desperately don't want it to become a chore. But I mean, parcel delivery back and forth is 5-starring some of these places isn't difficult. Accessing some of them is a bit of a pain at the moment. I figured out that you can use it, either a long distance level 3 truck or the high damage or high defensive capability truck. You can drive up and over the snowy hills and all that sort of stuff in there, no trouble, as long as you're patient. But you'll drive over one piece of ground that looks flat as anything, and next thing the truck's bouncing up and down and twisting sideways, and its back end's spinning out and dragging you back sideways down the hill for no apparent reason. And it does it on flat ground as well, which is annoying me. So whatever they did in their last update, they can undo it, thanks, because it's just become difficult. And I don't particularly feel like changing my play style in it halfway through. So, but yeah,
Okay.
I'll just be a grumpy old man and complain about stuff.
No, the funny thing is because like this is one of the reasons I much prefer Death Stranding 2.
Nib,
Yeah.
Death Stranding 2, I think, is a much better game than the first.
I think so too. I
enjoyed the first, but Death Stranding 2 is much better.
See, I enjoyed the first two, and there's some. It's weird because me and Wooly, we were having this discussion, and there's some people who are saying like, should I play them both, or should I play them just jump to Death Stranding 2? And it sounds like a weird thing, but I feel like most gamers would actually just prefer jumping straight to 2, even though you will miss some of the context and story. I don't know if playing both back to back would just be too much familiarity and like kind of not repetition, but introduce that sameness. Because you are doing a similar thing in the second game, but it's just everything is more refined, everything is less frustrating. The speed at which you're given new stuff and can kind of overcome obstacles is more rewarding. That you have more set piece moments, action moments, combat moments interspersed in between that keep the thrill up and the engagement up and just mix things up in terms of diversity, mechanically speaking. I just think it's a much more cohesive overall experience. And certainly more exciting with less like downtime and less of the things that Falky's talking about. Like, because Wooly was saying he really enjoyed those frustrating aspects because it gave him like a more of a sense of accomplishment when he. But for me, like Falky, some of it just frustrated me. I was just like, bro, I can't be bothered. Like, why? Once I attain a certain level, or I have a certain level 3, this level, like Falky said, like I should feel like okay, the things that were more annoying are far less annoying. But if late game these minor things are still causing issues, I think you haven't quite overcome that curve well enough. And even in Silksong, when you go back to other areas or even in new areas, and with the new skill and muscle memory that you've acquired, oftentimes you do pull off things that even surprise you. It's like I've been playing this game for 25, 30 odd hours now. I basically realistically just have become much better, and my equipment is much better. My pin does more damage. I have way more maneuverability, etc., etc. So everything is easier or more fluid. But in Death Stranding, maybe it didn't quite nail that progression as well as DS2.
I don't disagree with you, Deb. I think it's a more cohesive, focused experience. Death Stranding 2, that is.
I agree.
Yeah, in comparison to the first, I feel like the first Kojima just went full Kojima. This one, it was a little more focused Kojima.
Yeah. I also think the first, like, it was probably very much a product of budget, time, and new studio and everything, new engine. because they banged that out like 3 years, I think, right? There is a brand new studio, new engine. Admittedly, they had some assistance from Guerrilla Games, but to create a whole new studio, a whole new IP, to a new engine and everything, new world, characters, you name it, in 3 years, it's impressive. So yeah, that was kind of almost like a blueprint. And I feel like Death Stranding 2 is probably like the game he always wanted to make, or that he would have preferred Death Stranding 1 to have more of, but just did not have the budget, time, and experience.
Budget time, I did, and it's actually, and that's reflected in the review scores too, and a lot of the reviews. If you could look at Death Stranding 2 versus Death Stranding 1, Death Stranding 2 is actually reviewed, the Metacritic's higher, so and then it has some of those quality of life improvements that came later in Death Stranding 1. Some of the things that Falky mentioned with driving the different vehicles. I mean, a lot of those things came later on and are now in Death Stranding 2, but are also introduced earlier in Death Stranding 2. You get a lot of quality of life improvements.
It's a shame because like
earlier in Death Stranding 2,
DS1 sold decent but didn't sell like amazingly well. I just think it's too niche. And it kind of set the tone and the word of mouth for the second game. Because again, even though the second game, based on estimations we have, is selling better than the first game, it's still not like selling gangbusters. It's not one of those tentpole, selling several million type of releases, which is disappointing to me because I feel like if this had been the first game, it would have curated so much bigger of an audience and a cult following. But clearly the first one just it didn't resonate as much with the masses, and that's kind of lingered over to the second one, even though the second one is more traditionally enjoyable, like much more action and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's a shame, but it is what it is.
I do want to welcome to the show Gabe Logic. What are you currently playing right now? And welcome.
Yeah, nothing really new, at least not this week. I've been playing EA's F1 24 via Game Pass on PC.
You also have the setup now, right? Do you have the wheel and pedals now, right?
Yeah. I was just playing with my more casual set tonight, the Thrustmaster TMX. But I do have those things mounted on H-frames now, so when I'm twisting the wheel, it's not like it's shaking my whole desk and rocking my my monitor. So it's a little.
What wheel do you use?
So tonight I was just using the Thrustmaster TMX, which is part of their, which is an Xbox and PC compatible wheel and pedals. That's more of their casual set. I do also have the Thrustmaster T300 RS Gran Turismo edition, which is part of their. Yeah, which is part of their advanced wheel line and is PlayStation and PC compatible. But yeah, so I was playing that tonight. I've been doing another run in the Division 2 on PC, and I set up that Thrustmaster T300 RS to play some Gran Turismo with wheel and pedals. I haven't gotten started with that yet. And earlier in the week, I was playing Hollow Knight via PlayStation Plus cloud streaming on PC.
Okay, you got a nice little variety there, I think, in some of the content you're playing. So that's awesome. Yeah, I have. Speaking of Death Stranding, Nib and Falky, I just wrapped up. Roll credits to Death Stranding 2. So,
oh, nice. What are your overall thoughts?
Again, I thought it was a better game than the first Death Stranding. It's probably it's not my game of the year. That's still Expedition 33, but this would be my number 2.
Yeah, same.
The ending, the story, just a much better experience. I wonder. I'm wondering if they. I got to be careful. I don't want to spoil anything. I guess I'll say this. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a Death Stranding 3.
Yeah. So what he said about that, he's actually answered this. He said he does have Death Stranding 3 already written out, but he doesn't want to make it. He said,
really?
He said if another studio wants the idea or wants to make the game, he'll, I guess, license it to them or whatever. I don't know the exact words he used, but he said he feels like it's something along those lines. He basically said, "I've written it already, but it's not something I want to pursue. If someone else wants to do it, I'll be happy to help them with it."
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The motion capture in the game is just, I mean,
outrageous.
Some of the best.
Outrageous. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at some of the motion capture footage in comparison to the game, like it's almost 1-to-1. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean,
there were some nice plot twists in the story. Some things that I didn't really piece together right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I don't think I came across as many BTs as I did the first one.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and I was a little disappointed by that. There's certainly BT. I mean, and there's newer BTs too. There's like there's the gazers. I think that's what they're called, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you run into them when you first get to Australia, and there's that tense moment. But there was definitely more tense moments in Death Stranding 1 than 2. So I was a little disappointed by that. That was one complaint that I had.
Yeah, same. Like another issue I had was I was playing on expert and I actually thought it was too easy. And to be fair, I made it easy for myself as well. But like it was just, I don't know if you did this much, but it was too fun not to use the summon BTs. To me, like it was one of the most fun things in the game is like basically having giant kaiju battles that you're kind of in between.
That's exactly what it was. It was like a big kaiju battle. Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. Yeah,
and I absolutely love that. Like, so whenever I caught a BT, the bigger and bolder they were, I'd love that because it's like, oh, I know this crazy ass thing I'm going to be able to use against another crazy ass thing. But unfortunately, that also made the game and those sections way too easy because it's not just that they damage for you, it's that they basically take the attention of the enemies or the BT or whatever. So I would have liked if expert was like far more challenging. Maybe if they like 2-hit you or something like that. Even 1-hit you, I wouldn't have minded. But yeah, one of my few negatives.
Yeah, Corey Mass saying there's a story lore reason for less BTs in Death Stranding 2. I wasn't aware of that, but even then I didn't like that there was less BTs. Because the BT battles, I mean, in Death Stranding 1, they're these, big set pieces, right? And in some of those BT battles, and you're fighting the larger BTs, it introduces like some platforming elements because you have to navigate, and kind of climb and jump if you can onto some of the, I guess, floating buildings. You don't want to get stuck in the tar trying to fight a BT. It's never good. But yeah, the summoning BT was cool. What else was there? There was something else. Some Metal Gear Solid references in the game. I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah.
Especially
there was quite a lot of mechs in it, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean but there was I think there were some, if I remember, there were some verbal like Metal Gear Solid references.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there's a couple times they broke the fourth wall, which is kind of interesting. The characters did in the game. Die Hard Man did it once.
You shouldn't have said that.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oops.
Sorry.
I shouldn't. Oh my gosh. What else? Trying to think here. I can't remember now. Anyhow, so I rolled credits again. It was my second favorite game that I've played so far this year. Much better than the first, I thought. Yeah, I also played. I mentioned that I had to take a trip for work, so I got to play on the plane. I took my Nintendo Switch. Got to play Shinobi: Art of the Vengeance.
Ooh, I really want to play that.
Yeah, so I had this conversation with Logic, and this is coming off of playing Death Stranding 2.
Mhm.
And I'm playing and nothing against. So again, Shinobi: Art of Vengeance. It's that classic 2D action platforming
Yeah.
game. It's a visually appealing looking. I think it's visually appealing.
Mm.
The game I put about 2 hours. So the game starts off with you get a bit of the background of the main character, and you introduce the main protagonist or antagonist. Kind of gives me that the visual style reminds me of Streets of Rage 4 a lot. So again, it's got like that kind of like a retro feel to it.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of the combats, it's a lot of that fast-paced, side-scrolling combat. I don't know if Hollow Knight's like that. Silk was it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see like the ninjutsu things on the screen, like those are like special abilities you can unlock, take out multiple enemies and things, do like cool moves. There's like these kill finishers that you earn, and you start that you earn like the first 2 hours of the game you start playing.
Would you say it's difficult?
No, I wouldn't say it's difficult.
No. So Silksong is more like kind of like the Soulsborne of Metroidvania games. I know that's so overused, and I'm sorry for that, but it's more of that kind of ilk. You really have to. You'll be fighting some of these bosses so many times and doing some of these runbacks so many times. It's more of that kind of a flavor of game. Whereas from people I've spoken to, I've actually spoken to a few people who enjoyed Shinobi more than Silksong, or at least so far what they played of Silksong, which is more of a reason why I really want to play it. But I just didn't want to do two side scrollers back to back. But I will get there. I will get to.
All right, so same team from Streets of Rage made Shinobi. Okay, that would make sense. And Jenna Hayes, by the way, that's a very interesting name. I won't say how I know that name, but that is a very. Wouldn't it be funny if that was actually the real Jenna Hayes? By the way, that would be interesting.
I haven't heard that name in ages.
I know. I haven't heard Jenna Hayes.
That's like a
time.
classic, if you get what I mean.
Yes, it is, and I wonder if this person is a fan of Jenna Hayes, and maybe that's why that's their name. But pretty interesting. So it's again, that side scrolling. What else? Now, like the one thing I did is, again, I played 2 hours. When you get to the first level is pretty much just all like it's very linear. It's all side scrolling, right?
Yeah.
You get to the second part of the game, or I think the second level, it opens up a bit more. You start introducing more of that verticality. You get more exploration. There's I think there's they start introducing different environmental hazards, right? Like you can't there's a swamp level. You don't want to get caught in the swamp, you die. There's these explosive barrels that drop from the sky that you can use to take out enemies. And then you start getting different upgrades. You can experiment with different combination of attacks. Game has a skill tree. The soundtrack sounds kind of like the old school, like that NES soundtracks. But the combat's very fast, stylish, and true Shinobi fashion.
Are you enjoying it though? Let me get a temperature gauge. If you had to give a preliminary rating, where would you be at?
So I think, look, I was having this conversation with Logic. I think it's a good game. I certainly appreciate what it is, but I don't know if this is something I want to continue playing.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it could be a me thing. It could be that I grew up playing those types of games. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, sort of those retro style type of games.
Yeah.
And I'm happy. I'm excited to see Shinobi back. And I hope this game does well. And I hope they give us a modern day take on Shinobi.
Yeah.
but I don't know that that's the style of game I want to play right now.
Fine.
As Logic said in the live chat, AAA BRAP.
You know what the
that's
thing is? I was going to say, actually, if we go around the room and get like a temperature check on everyone's, like, say maybe top 3 or 4 favorite games of the year so far. But I will say as well, like, I'm more of a AAA guy as well, but there have been some AA and indie titles this year that like have really blown me away. Like, this might be weird to people, but I actually enjoyed, or overall anyway, from what I played of Silksong, my indie game of the year is still Sword of the Sea. I don't know if you played that. It's on PlayStation Plus. If you want to give it a go.
Nib, I should mention I've also played that as well, but I haven't put enough time to really.
Okay.
It reminds me of Abzu a bit.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the same developer, but I don't want to give any commentary on it because I've only played maybe 30 minutes of it.
Okay. Yeah, fine. But yeah, that's not it's not much, but it's so weird because it's such a different type of experience to, you know, like a Silksong or a Blueprint or whatever. So different, but it's weird. Maybe it just came at the right time. You know, certain games, like, they just have to catch you in the right space of mind, sort of thing. Like, I played, I played Battlefield, and I played these sort of heavier AAA games. So Sword of the Sea was just a perfect palate cleanser. It like cut through all of that, you know, high octane craziness and production, and it was just like relaxing, thrilling, peaceful, calm, and like I just needed that at the time to like kind of refresh for those more serious games. Game Logic and Falky, what are your like favorite games of the year so far? He said, "Yeah, brother, yeah."
The problem is I just don't get a chance to play so many. It's not Death Stranding.
Corey has that's a good list right there.
Yeah, I think the one that I've enjoyed the most this year, it'll be a toss up between Dave the Diver and like a dragon, the man who erased his name. I've found both of those for very different reasons to just be very much, I want to go back and play more. I want to play more. They're probably the main two that have just held me engaged in wanting to do more in those worlds, and so I platinum both of them and spent stupid amount of hours playing them and just explored and enjoyed everything there was within them. So yeah, I think they're probably the two standouts.
What about you, Logic?
Oh, I know Logic's favorite game of the year so far, but
which is?
I'll let him answer. I'll let him answer that.
Yeah, I mean the only one I'm really going to speak to is Expedition 33.
I
mean, my taste this year have been really weird because Expedition 33 kind of knocked me off the gas lifestyle, which I've been in for like 6 years, and but as a substitute replacement for that, I've gone back to spending a lot of time in sports games because I hadn't played sports games since like the early 2010s, and that's kind of become the replacement. Story wise, I mean, what I've really liked, I mean, so Expedition 33, and I'll count that as an example of like best in class games, right? That I like because they're the best in class games. Just in terms of kind of quirky story perspectives, probably after those two things, I've enjoyed so far the most Avowed and South of Midnight.
Yeah, I enjoyed South of Midnight. It didn't blow me away, but it was a solid game. Like I think like for South of Midnight, for me, it was the mechanics and the combat that didn't blow me away, and you do a lot of that. I found it quite repetitive and simplistic, but everything else around the game, the story, the music, the characters, the art, the world, I just loved all of that stuff. And the kind of weird stop frame, kind of the aardvark type animation style. Like for me, that was really cool. When I was playing it, it had its unique identity and it was very distinct. and you don't always get that these days when you play games, or AA, AAA games. But yeah, it was a cool game, but it just didn't blow me away. Close.
Yeah, and I would never, I would never make an argument about, Avowed and South of Midnight being, the best games of this year, or the most critically, but they were just ones that hit the right drumbeat for me at the time. With Avowed, I appreciate from a design perspective a lot of the things that Avowed did to not be a pain in the ass about certain things, that they just like, there's a lot of like RPG stuff that is just like stingy just to be RPG stuff, right? Just because that's Dungeons and Dragons style kind of RPG that like don't actually make any sense and don't actually make the game don't actually make games more fun.
It's so weird because I haven't played Avowed, and I think it looks beautiful, like visually looks really stunning, but everything I've seen on it, all the gameplay, I don't know, it just seems really plodding and dull, and the combat doesn't appeal to me. I don't know, it just seems a bit rigid. So even though I have enjoyed RPGs and like Western RPGs in recent years, like I love, Baldur's Gate 3, etc. Like I'm kind of worried that after those kind of games and after Expedition 33, Avowed's just not going to do it. So I haven't. But you're saying you enjoyed it, so maybe I should check it out.
Yeah, but I mean that's also just a me thing. Like again, I wouldn't, I wouldn't put it up. I wouldn't recommend it to other people, particularly people who are snobbish gamers. But
whoa.
No, I mean, so yeah, it's just
judged.
But like as a design experiment like that, those are the things I appreciated out of it, right?
Give me your ratings on those games. Of the 3 games you mentioned, Expedition 33, South of Midnight, and Avowed.
Oh, Expedition 33 for me would be at 10. And then Avowed and South of Midnight would probably be high, depending on what type of scale you used. I mean, I would put those at like a high 7. So if we were back in the days where you gave tenths of a point, I'd probably, put them somewhere between a 7.5 and a 7.8.
Yeah. I would have given the same to South of Midnight, but I bumped my score to an 8. And this is probably, I don't know if you agree with it or not, but because I checked and it's like $40. And I know, obviously, I'm assuming you played it on Game Pass. I played it through Game Pass. But like to me, like for the type of game it is and for the amount of game you get and the style and everything like that, I think $40 is like a steal, really. And I feel that way about Silksong. Like, I know I'm judging it like on these design aspects that are a little bit harsh, but it's like a £16 game. Like, that's outrageous that you're getting like potentially like 100 hours of content or whatever if you do all the extras and stuff for £16. Like, to me, it doesn't compute. But it's an awesome thing, obviously. But yeah, for that reason, I felt like I actually had to bump it up.
Sorry, I'm going to interject here very quickly. I must apologize. I got to jump out.
Oh, snap.
Couple of things to chase up on and sort out, and thanks for having me for the 45 minutes, and I will wish you all the best and catch up with you at a later stage.
All right, thank you, Falky. Appreciate you stopping by. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
I don't too much, Brad. I wanted to hear his take on the exclusivity stuff as well.
For me, South of Midnight, like it's not like one of the big things I love about the style of games that I tend to prefer is things with lots of deep systems and systems of systems and subsystems. And so South of Midnight didn't really have that from that depth perspective, but just for me personally, like there's some regional culture that's associated with that story. There's some ethnic culture that's associated with that story. The notion of like I think from a literary perspective, one of the things we don't do a great job of recognizing and raising up in America is that America has a mythology, right? And it's a mythology that comes from a mix of a lot of, the immigrant cultures that we're based on, right? As the influx of everybody has brought like a little piece of things from their regional mythologies and kind of created this intermix, right? In the rise of mythologies that came up
Yeah,
you know, in
100%.
the first century of the birth of this country, and like that's not a thing that we talk about, right? That's not it's, I mean, quite frankly, we barely even teach it in school. We give tons of airtime to, you know, Victorian era novels and things like that, but like we don't talk about our own culture that is hyper specific to America. And South of Midnight, I think, does that. And so, you know, again, from a literary perspective, that's just a thing that I really got into with that game, because I've read a lot of that content.
So it's a really interesting segue, right? Sorry, I know we keep, you know, broadening the subject, but that is one thing like I do love about entertainment media in general, but also video games, because, you know, like you said, the southern aspect and folklore of South of Midnight, which, you know, I was doing some reading afterwards after playing it, and a lot of it is based on real aspects of folklore, and I thought that was interesting and really intriguing, because I had no idea about it. Obviously, that there's not many avenues for me to learn about that stuff, and even if I like went on holiday south, I doubt I'd be getting an education like that. So amazing that I experienced that, and I felt that way even to a degree, like playing, say, Black Myth Wukong. You know, it's now, like, especially with the level of fidelity that we have and technology, it just little things like, you know, when you go on holiday and you know, you see shrines in Japan, or like a temple in one country, or in Thailand and Malaysia, they all have like intricacies and differences and detail in the architecture, and, you know, you know, there's so many facets to all these things culturally. And now playing games with the fidelity we have, again, like I would enjoy just admiring the temple designs in Black Myth Wukong, and seeing how they used like geometry and you know, the carvings and all this other stuff. And it's so hyper detailed, and so much attention was put in all of that, even in the garments and stuff. I really loved that shit. And obviously you had the mythology with the journey to the to the west or whatever, all that stuff. And yeah, it was fascinating to me. Even the little, like, in between the different chapters, the kind of scroll, the painted scroll kind of storytelling and all of that, just awesome. There was another game I played, I think it was like Inuit culture. Again, really interesting, because the whole different side of things that I wasn't familiar with. So I do love the fact that games can explore this stuff. And I hate the fact that we are in a place, politically and culturally, where this stuff is kind of rejected almost. Like, oh, it's like, I'm not even that super liberally inclined, but I hate that people just put woke on everything just because it's different art. But to me, it's like more interesting. I don't want to just play the same shit with the same stories and the same characters and the same culture.
Yeah.
I want broader experiences. So it's interesting to me. Even Miles Morales, the fact that it was, you know, is it Puerto Rican or whatever, the culture and the aspects and the food, even that his like mom cooks and stuff, and you know, the festival that they had, all of that stuff is intriguing to me. And it's disappointing that we're in a place in society now where people want to reject all that just because it's different to what they know, or what they, you know, what they're comfortable with. But it is what it is.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You talked about like the diversity in games that you want to see. And that's something that I'll never understand, how people get upset about a game being different, or female protagonists looking a certain way. It's a bit, I don't know. It's the only way I can describe it is weird. It's just weird to me. I don't understand the thought process behind that. Why somebody's that bothered by it. But you know, the at least for me, you know, as we were talking about Shinobi, I think you know, having experienced Death Stranding 2, and then also having played Expedition 33, which I was on my third playthrough prior to Death Stranding 2 coming out. I think that's part of the problem for me right now. Like those are the kind of experiences I want, right? And not that Shinobi's not a good game. Mechanically, it's a great game. It doesn't offer anything to me outside of that, right? And that's, you know, again, that's not always been the case. I think I just need to be in a maybe in a different mood, I guess, or you know, or want a different experience. But now I want something a bit more in depth, something more involved for my gaming experience. That's why I cannot wait for Ghost of Yote, which is coming out soon. Because I have played like other like smaller titles, AA indie titles. One title comes to mind is, I don't know if you remember Inside, which came out in 2016. Inside's a great game.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite games in 2016, and that was I forget the developer behind that. But that's a 2D or 2D and a half. I don't know. Is that even a thing? 2D and a half? I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
but
3D, but 3D. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
let's call it 2.5D.
Yeah, it's a platform puzzler type game.
Yeah.
So that was a great game. But yeah, but again, I certainly appreciate the gameplay mechanics of Shinobi, Art of Vengeance. I don't know if I'll pick it up. Maybe I will, because I don't know. I just got to be in the mood, I guess. I just want AAA experiences right now, I guess is what I'm getting at.
You know, with Ghost of Yote, it's weird because I'm actually not very hyped for it. I'm not sure why, because like I did really enjoy Ghost of Tsushima. In fact, I was more hyped that they announced Legends is coming for it than I am the actual game. And I don't know if if playing Shadows has put me off or something. Like, I'm not really sure. Like, because you know, last year or the year before, I was so hyped for Yote. But yeah, I would say like Shadows, Assassin's Creed Shadows was actually one of my bigger disappointments of the year. And it's weird because for the first 20-30 hours, I loved it. And then, like so many Ubisoft games, it just, oh my God, it just got so repetitive, and more of the mechanics has frustrated me. But now, because I've kind of had a bit of that like samurai feel, I'm just like, do I want to do that for another 50, 100 hours? Like, you know, but I'm sure Ghost of Yote will you know, do its own thing and do it probably better than Ubisoft, let's be honest.
Yeah, I do want to move on to Nintendo Direct. So we do have a Nintendo Direct. It's an hour-long Direct announced for this Friday on the eve of Super Mario Brothers 40th anniversary, which is crazy. I just, I remember Mario. I remember when Mario Brothers first came out, like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so it's an hour-long show, and Nintendo hasn't confirmed what's going to be shown yet.
It's going to be Mario. Let's be honest. Come on.
Yeah. I would imagine Mario. I would imagine something Mario. It's got to be something Mario, right? But then people are speculating maybe we finally get something Metroid Prime 4 related, which is what I'm hoping for. But I would imagine that Metro 5. I would think that I can't even talk. Metroid Prime 4 would probably be a Switch 2 exclusive. Could be wrong. Maybe they release it on the Nintendo Switch as well. But maybe this might be a Switch 2
But
exclusive.
do you think they show that with Beyond still coming?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Because Metroid Beyond is just around the corner. So would they really double?
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. You're right. Yeah. But some people are speculating like maybe there's some kind of Metroid 4 Prime release date. Who knows? I think there was some news that I have to go back and look again. I thought I read something earlier today about Capcom releasing the more Resident Evil games on the Switch 2, and that the next Resident Evil, what's the next Resident Evil game called? Let me try to pull this up real quick. I don't want to.
Are you talking about Requiem?
Yeah, Requiem. That's it. Requiem. Yeah.
I thought they said Requiem. I'm trying to find this article. Requiem would be coming to the Switch 2 as well.
You know, Jonathan Rodriguez said, FYI, it's coming to both Switch 1 and 2. What's he talking about? Metroid Prime 4?
You might be talking about Metroid Prime 4.
Oh, that's disappointing if it's coming to 1.
Yeah, here we go. So there's an insider that's claiming, reliable insider leaker claims, this is Kotaku, that Capcom has plans to support Resident Evil 7 and more to Nintendo's new console. This was on Reset Era.
So Metroid Prime 4 has always been a Switch 1 title. It was announced. It was announced before the Switch 2 was actually ever announced.
Yeah, that's right.
True. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Yep, that's right. I forgot about that. Thank you, Logic. I completely forgot about that. I forgot they teased Metroid Prime in letters or something like 8 years ago, a long time ago.
Yeah, it was
8 years ago, but it was a couple of years ago. And that game I think had some development problems, right? Didn't they reboot the development of the game? I'd have to go back and look. I feel like that game had some development issues.
Yeah, I think they no, that was Dread. They said I think Dread was restarted development like 4 times or something. Metroid Dread. That was in development since it was something ridiculous. Like
Dread was a good game.
Yeah. But I actually really liked that story about Dread because it just showed the kind of commitment Nintendo studios have to quality and to iteration. So, sometimes we think that Nintendo games, obviously they are lower budget. They have fewer people and, whatever devoted to them. And obviously the asset budget and stuff is different. But where I think, people may not focus as much, where a lot of cost is going, is the iterative nature and the exhaustive testing that they do. Like, to restart a game like 4 times just because you weren't happy that it wasn't nailing on the quality side is pretty impressive. Like, not every studio would do that. Just to keep trying to refine it until it's incredible.
Well, I have to say that one of the things that really impressed me, one of the games that really impressed me on the Nintendo Switch was the Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh yeah,
and Breath of the Wild. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what kind of wizardry Nintendo was doing. Like, that game runs really well on Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, insane.
It's insane. It's a really good game. And I'm amazed. Yeah. Like, Link doesn't speak, and it never bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah, so like the last 2 Zeldas have been my game of the year each time they've come out. So it's like, yeah, that's the thing.
How about the crafting in Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom?
Crazy.
The ability
I actually preferred Breath of the Wild, by the way.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I preferred Breath of the Wild.
They're both excellent games. I think for me, that the thing that takes Tears of the Kingdom over the top is the ability to craft different weapons and
right.
craft different vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay. To traverse like that was, I would literally just like sit there for like 20-30 minutes just trying to craft different different vehicles, and it was fun. And that's
super fun.
And it was a lot of fun. It did, I just wanted to see what I could do, what I could create.
The reason I preferred Breath of the Wild, don't get me wrong, like I still adore Tears of the Kingdom. Like I said, it was my game of the year. But like for me, Breath of the Wild is actually like in my top 5 of all time. Is because I thought, like, in Tears of the Kingdom, the towers, they like catapult you into the air and you basically just glide to wherever you want to go. There's a novelty to that the first few times, and it's really fun. And obviously you get the beautiful vistas and the thrill of, gliding through the air, but it kind of trivializes traversal in a sense and exploration, because wherever you want to get to becomes very easy to get to, especially when you upgrade your glider. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, when I saw something of interest in the distance, the entire process and journey and challenges and everything else, the sense of adventure of finally getting to your destination, all the climbing, all the weather, all the enemies, all of this and that, when you scaled this vast land and got to where you want to go and then go to the next place and the next place, I just love the reward in that, in this kind of like being absorbed in the world and exploration.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and then
so you feel like some of the building mechanics around vehicles took away from that.
Yeah,
or the ability to upgrade the glider and
exactly. Yeah, the mainly the towers, and the other thing was, what's the underside level called? The dark area.
Yeah, the dark area.
Yeah, whatever that was. Like, I just thought that I never really enjoyed those parts of the game that much. So yeah, even though I love the building and I love the sky, like, shrines and everything like that, all of that stuff was amazing. Some of the other design decisions I thought took away from things that made the first game great. But you know what? I don't even dislike the fact that they did that, because you don't necessarily want a sequel that is just friggin' the same, like, but different. Like, so it's cool that they iterated, and because some people may prefer that type of design versus what Breath of the Wild did. So it iterated enough, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the iteration that that you mentioned with Tears of the Kingdom, for me was just the ability to the building mechanics, create vehicles, new weapons.
So much freedom.
Yeah, so much. And I'm not really big into puzzles.
Yeah.
But I actually enjoyed some of the puzzle solving in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Yeah, and it's cool how you can actually solve stuff in a very different way to other people, because I would solve something in one way, and then I'd see videos and I'd be like, oh my god, like they did it totally different to how I did it, which I found really fascinating. Because in most of these types of games, there's like a set way, but it's so broad mechanically and physics wise that you literally can approach things completely differently, which is awesome. Like, yeah, so that's the thing with Nintendo, right? They know the value of their IP. I know there's been a lot of hullabaloo about their pricing and stuff lately, and I do agree that Nintendo takes the piss with margins. Like, statistically, factually, their margins are much higher than the other platforms. But you get what you pay for. Like, maybe not in the production side of things, but they have a quality to their games that they know there is the adequate demand for. So they price, to meet that demand.
Yeah. Speaking of demand, I don't know if you saw this, if you guys saw this, according to an insider, Wolverine. And there's this rumor reveal of some state of play this month around Insomniac's Wolverine game. And some of the, according to this insider, and this is Insider Gaming podcast, from a few playtesters that I've been speaking to, they think the game looks fantastic. So that's good news. Again, Wolverine was announced back in September 2021, so it's about 4 years now in development.
Yeah,
probably maybe a little bit longer than that. I don't know. What do you think, Nib? Do you think? I'm treating this as rumor. I don't think we'll see it September. I could be wrong, but
I think usually I would be like, but there's been too many rumors about Wolverine propping up, and Tom Henderson. Usually I'm like really anti like insider stuff because it's so much bollocks like about the internet at the moment. But Tom Henderson, like, credit where credit's due, I literally keep a note of the credibility and the hit rate of certain insiders. And he's been really, really on point with PlayStation stuff. VR2, DualSense Edge, Portal, PS5 Slim, PS5 Pro, across the board, basically, all the kind of PlayStation related centric stuff. He's been on the money on, or as far as I have seen, anyway. Obviously, if there's stuff I haven't seen, I can't speak to that. So yeah, I think when he says he's heard this or that a trailer's ready for it, it probably is true, and that's the only reason I tweeted about it, because his track record is really good. But yeah, I have a feeling they're probably cooking. I think he said like, yeah, that they're really impressed with what they have so far, and I can see that. I can see it. I have a feeling that Wolverine probably won't be as like broad in scope as Spider-Man was, just because of the speed of velocity of travel and the city and everything like that. So I feel like we may actually see more cinematic fidelity as well, because it might not be like necessarily open world. It might be like wide linear areas, or a world that isn't as expansive. So, and you don't move through as quickly. So asset streaming and everything, they can push a lot more. So I'm really, really excited to see what they come up with. I just hope it's really gory. I'd be so disappointed if if it's really like PG.
Yeah, you kind of have to imagine that Wolverine has to be a bit gory, right?
Not a bit gory. It should be crazy gory. I want Logan. I don't want like the previous Wolverines. I want Logan Wolverine. Like I want limbs chopping off and shit. I want to, I don't think they will do that. I don't know. Some people have told me they are aiming for that, but if that is the case, I would love it. Like we don't like, yeah. There's so much potential.
Yeah, I don't know. Logic is. Do you think Wolverine needs to be a bit violent?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, particularly, depending on what storylines they explore, and I didn't pay any attention to the leak, so I don't know what's, content wise where they're going. But if you're gonna bring in one of Wolvie's, biggest enemies with Sabretooth, it's tough to do a fight like that without it being, with blood and stuff going anywhere. It's also really tough to represent his healing powers unless you'd kind of do. Take it kind of in the Deadpool direction and really show him getting, seriously injured. So,
true.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that logic. You're right that like you really can't highlight that particular power of his without there being some level of violence, right? So
yeah, 100%. Can you imagine if like instead of getting slashed and gashed and bleeding, it's just like a little fucking health bar, it just it just revives? Like that would be really boring, considering like Logic was saying, like the potential there. It could be so. Because again, technologically, like these systems are much more powerful. Like you could really put a lot of detail into like the damage systems or the I know I'm making it sound like a psycho, but just the gore and the physics behind that. Like if I chop off someone's arms or legs, like maybe anatomically and in terms of physics, they actually react realistically. And shit. I know it makes me sound crazy, but I just think visually and in terms of like the spectacle and the immersion factor, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think the leaks to your point about the not being open world but maybe being like open linear. I thought remember they leaked like alpha footage of Wolverine that was released like 2 years ago, I think. I thought it showed that a bit. I thought that was kind of
and
it showed he had the ability to kind of like see through walls or sense or something. There's some kind of, I don't know if it was seeing through walls, but there was something where he could see enemies or something.
I
don't know. I don't remember. But
Insomniac is like one of PlayStation's best gets, man. Imagine 229 million, and in a way, they're kind of carrying this generation for PlayStation. Like,
I mean, they really are.
They really are, and even financially, like we saw the sales, the all-time sales, and it's like they are carrying PlayStation right now. Like for something that cost them 229 million only, which as far as like acquisitions go is peanuts. They're banging out some games that are like making them eye-watering amounts of money and drawing so many people to the ecosystem. Crazy.
Yeah, they have been probably the best acquisition that Sony's made. If you look at what they've done with, I mean, how many games have they released this generation alone?
3, I think, right? So far. Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2, and Rift Apart.
Hold on a sec. You're speaking of Insomniac. Nib.
Go on.
So you this was interesting. You did a bit of homework here.
Yeah.
You picked up some Circana numbers. By the way, 30th anniversary of PlayStation. And I completely forgot. North America released I believe it was yesterday. Was it yesterday? I can't remember now. I also know that It was 26 years ago, actually, that yesterday that the Sega Dreamcast launched here in North America. And the Dreamcast, I thought, had one of the best consoles, in my opinion, of all time.
Yeah.
And one of the best console launch lineups.
Phenomenal.
And did a lot, I think, to kind of like give us a bit of a preview of what the future consoles would look like. You saw what the original Xbox did, kind of with its, with Xbox Live. Sega had online.
Yeah.
Sega had the not an Ethernet port in the back, but the 56K. And so they did a lot of innovative things with that console. Unfortunately, it just didn't pan out for Sega. And then we have the PlayStation 30th anniversary launch of the first PlayStation 1 in North America as well. I remember 1995. And that was, there were so many great games on that console as well. Final Fantasy VII comes to mind. Metal Gear Solid. Wow.
Insane.
I know there's more I'm leaving out, but just a great console.
Metal Gear Solid with like the controller port thing with Psycho Mantis and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That generation, it really blew me away. Like there's certain things like that scene, Aerith getting stabbed, by Sephiroth. Like I remember that's the first time I ever cried in a video game. Like I was so emotional about it. On the verge of.
Yeah, no, that was a punch. That was a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
More so than playing. Well, it's interesting because playing the remake now or the reboot. There's a lot of nostalgia for me seeing Sephiroth.
Yeah, 100%.
And I remember like playing Final Fantasy VII remake, and the first time I see Sephiroth, I thought in my mind, we meet again.
yeah, 100%.
Because if you play the first game on the PlayStation, at least for me, like playing the first game or playing the original, I should say, on the PlayStation. And then going back and knowing what happens with Sephiroth and Aerith, and knowing, that scene.
Yeah.
It just, I didn't realize that it carried with me for so many years.
Yeah.
The impact of that, because I don't think we had anything as cinematic as that at that point in gaming. And the ability, because of that, the ability to tell stories changed and the emotional impact changed.
It's a funny thing because like some of my favorite games of all time, when I go back and like play games, they're sometimes a bit shit. Like GoldenEye was one of my all-time favorites, and then when I played the recent remaster, I remember thinking, what is this trash? Like it controls floosy goosey, like it's bland, there's not much on screen, and it's just like I forgot how archaic it was. But then I play like Final Fantasy VII, which is my favorite game of all time. I play that periodically. Admittedly, not like on a TV. I usually play it like on my mobile or like a portable device or something. And I don't know. I love it every time. So it like has aged so gracefully. And I think because it's like the pre-rendered backgrounds and stuff and everything like that, it lends itself to age. But even like Super Mario 64, like I still love that, and so these some games have aged gracefully. Then like Gears of War, like the number one is my favorite Gears. But when I played the remaster, even though I really enjoyed it, it didn't have that impact anymore. And even like Halo CE, like when I play these games back, they just they're not how I remembered. So yeah, for Final Fantasy, it's definitely like an all-timer, all-time classic.
Yeah, no, it really is. Even Aerith's theme song still hits for me.
Oh my god, the soundtrack is insane.
There's times where I'll go back and I'll just listen to Aerith's theme song over and over again.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
It might be one of my favorite like songs in a video game ever.
So One Winged Angel. Like to me, that's like the best boss music ever in history.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't believe it's like for a single boss or whatever, especially the full version anyway. Like it's just insane to me that this masterpiece was for this final boss. But yeah, even playing the remakes, like Wall Street and Gold Saucer and stuff. Like when I first saw them, I remember it's just like so insane because I feel like they absolutely nailed those places in these games in Rebirth and Remake beyond my expectations. Because I was actually internally had some anxiety. I was like, oh snap, why are they doing this shit? They'll probably fudge it up. It won't be great, or it won't have the kind of but they absolutely nailed that shit. The atmosphere, the sights, the sounds, like you could almost felt like you could smell that shit. And then Gold Saucer, just the excitement and vibrancy of it all. Like, yeah, they like hats off to them. They did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, no, they really did. They really did. So, yeah, I would say my favorite games of the PlayStation would be, of course, to no one's surprise, are going to be the big AAA games. Final Fantasy VII and Splinter Cell would be the top two for me. Not Splinter Cell. I'm sorry. Why did I say Splinter Cell? I meant Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah,
those would be my top two right there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Nib? What about you, Logic?
He always takes a while to respond. It's like he's going through like 50 buttons to unmute.
No, I thought he said you first. I thought.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
I wasn't clear that. Yeah, I did that in order. But yeah, go ahead, Nib.
Oh, me. As in classic games.
Yeah, out of the PlayStation 1 generation, what are your top two favorite games?
Final Fantasy VII. And Metal Gear Solid. I hate to say the same answers as you, but I have to be honest. Like, yeah, probably them. Like, they resonated with me the most. But there were some bangers like RPGs and even Wipeout. Like, yeah, I mean, Time Splitters. Like that. Some heavy hitters.
Siphon Filter was another one I remember too.
Siphon Filter. Was Ico on PS1 or PS2? I can't remember. Like
that was PS2.
Yeah. Okay. I always blend these bloody systems together. Like they all just merge together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Logic. What about you?
What some people don't realize is that the Days Gone takes place in the Siphon Filter universe. Apparently.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yep. So, what about you, Logic?
So your question was on the PlayStation 1?
Yeah, PlayStation 1. Your top two favorite games to celebrate 30 years of PlayStation.
Also Metal Gear Solid, but then Gran Turismo.
Oh yeah, GT.
Oh, yeah.
Gran Turismo was kind of set me on the path of being a big racing game fan. I didn't know it at the time because of course I wasn't on PC yet, obviously. But it was just I just spent hours and hours up, late at night, wee hours of the morning.
Yeah.
Playing this. I mean, it's kind of it's super interesting that for a gaming franchise, like in Formula One, I'm familiar with, like, there's tracks that I've been racing for like 2 decades, right? And so when I watch those tracks on TV, or I play them in the game, there's definitely a feeling of like memory and nostalgia with them because I've just been around them so long. But it kind of cracks me up that in the video game Gran Turismo, which is the only time you see some of those tracks, right? But Maple Valley and things like that, you've been racing those tracks, for 30 years now, and they still have kind of that familiarity.
Yeah. Which is your favorite Gran Turismo, out of curiosity?
Man, I don't know that I can land on one. I mean, I have to call it like a mix up, a mashup between 1 and 7. Like I can't take the technical achievement of 7 off the table. But there's obviously something about like that very first one. I am actually not as huge a fan
of 3.
I mean, there's just different ones in there. There was I can't remember. There were both Gran Turismo 5 and 6 on PlayStation 3?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So or I can't remember. Was it 6 or was it 4 and 5? Whichever one was the one that came out, like literally came out like a week after the PlayStation 4 launched. Like that's yeah. So that one, first of all, it's that launch date just resonates with me as being total buffoonery. But like I said, like I always say, unfortunately, people here in the audience are very familiar with the cliche. I always say, the people at Polyphony seem to always have like some C-suite officer's child like locked up in the basement. And that's why they're allowed to just put out a game like whenever the fuck they feel like putting a game out.
Yeah.
But then there was the first one they tried to do on was that 3 on PlayStation 3 where they tried to make it like an esports kind of thing, and then they put out like the first iteration, which was like a small number of cars and a small number of tracks, and then they tried to add on to it, like midway through the generation or whatever. But yeah, there's a bunch of ones in like in the in between years that I'm not really a fan of, and the huge one, I can't remember exactly what number it was, but I just distinctly remember the way I always describe it is in Gran Turismo 1, like you could race a track, you would come in like, seconds late, and you could actually like work on how you were cutting the corner, how you were getting through the corners on the track and actually shave seconds off your time and then come back and win a race, right? Or where you would go get a tuning part, right, and add it to your car, and you would actually need to get underneath the hood and like tune it, and that could be the difference. And then there was a certain point in the franchise where I feel like just all of that nuance just kind of got squeegeed out of it, and it really just became it was just a raw horsepower. Like either you came up to the starting line with more horsepower, right, than the rest of the field, and that determined if you were going to win the race. But yeah, but 1 and 7, are probably the ones that I like the most.
3 and 7 for me. Yeah. 3 and 7. But 7, yeah. Like what? Yeah, I think that's why sometimes where I do hear like a lot of negative sentiment about the releases like this generation so far from PlayStation. I don't, maybe it's starting to get that way because they need to release more games even though they're coming, but I did not feel that way because GT7 is like arguably one of my favorite Gran Turismo games ever, and that's not something I ever thought I would say after so many iterations. And then like Ragnarok I prefer to 2018. Rift Apart, is up there in one of the best Ratchet games, maybe Tools of Destruction, but Rift Apart is up there too. And then, Horizon Forbidden West with a banger. Returnal I absolutely love. So yeah, I mean, to me, they've had a lot of solid games. Like, and I love Spider-Man 2. Miles Morales was decent as well. So I don't personally share that sentiment. I remember actually thinking in the first half of the PS4 generation was a bit dead. Like, yeah, okay, you had, I think Bloodborne came in 2015, and then 2016 was Uncharted and stuff. But the first few years, like Shadowfall disappointed me. And Infamous was good, but it's not something like, it wouldn't be like a game of the year for me, the way, a Ragnarok or whatever would be. So yeah, I mean, I personally, I really like the gen so far, but they do need to get their kicks on with the second half of those bangers. But like Astrobot as well, phenomenal. Yeah,
Astrobot's a great game.
Phenomenal, yeah.
So Dib, I want to go back to your post here. You brought up Circana because Circana released some numbers.
Yeah,
and you mentioned most surprising thing about Circana US all-time PlayStation sales chart is only 1 out of 23 Call of Duty games that released on PlayStation consoles has outsold Spider-Man. Miles Morales, The Last of Us, and God of War have outsold 18 Call of Duty games, as well as Skyrim, Oblivion, Witcher 3, Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring, Cyberpunk 2077, and countless other huge selling multi-platform games. Not only is this incredibly impressive, but as I said many times prior, it reveals all platform sales charts don't tell us the full story. And when you go by individual sales on PlayStation, only some exclusives are indeed outselling even Call of Duty, one of the biggest and best-selling IPs in history.
Yeah.
And that was all from Circana.
Yeah.
And I see you have this here. You have the Circana numbers up here.
Yeah.
Spider-Man looks like, was Spider-Man the 6th best-selling PlayStation game ever?
Ever in history. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, in history. In 30 odd years or whatever it is. Which is crazy. And it's interesting because even though Spider-Man 2 is not in the units list, it is in the revenue list. And we do know from data that Spider-Man 2 is selling faster than Spider-Man 1. For example, Spider-Man 1 reached 13.2 million sales in 11 months officially, based on the leaks. And Spider-Man 2, the last number we have for that is, I believe it's 11 million. Is it 11 million?
Yeah, they hit 11 million in 6 months.
Yeah, correct. 6 months. Yeah. So, and it was actually at the time the fastest selling PlayStation game ever in the history of PlayStation. I believe 2.5 million units in 24 hours. So, give it another generation or to the end of the generation or a few more years. I think that will probably be in there. In fact, I think there's going to be a few more PlayStation exclusives in that all-time list. So I'd love to see that list again in another 5 years, because I'm willing to bet money that Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 are also in that list, which would make it 6 PlayStation exclusives in the top 20 of all time in unit sales, which is interesting because first-party releases make up less than 2% of the overall library, but they're constituting 20% right now, and they'll be constituting 1/3 or whatever, or a bit more than 1/3 in potentially by the end of the generation, which is really quite impressive, and puts a hole in this notion that people aren't buying these systems, or aren't this exclusives aren't selling as well. And it's funny, I always used to say, I've said it on Crossfire Mooch's podcast a few times, people always talk Call of Duty, this and that, NCA, NBA 2K, like they always talk about these games selling more than the exclusives, and I always say, yeah, but these charts are combining all the platforms. So it's not a case that Call of Duty is selling more than this game or that game on an individual platform level. Like I'm sure some do, but probably all don't. And this data kind of highlights that now, because even though in the top 20, I think there's 9 Call of Duties or whatever, on PlayStation there have been 23 that have released. And yeah, you forget that, yes, like you read out, Spider-Man has outsold every single Call of Duty except one. And I know the context, like people are going to say, oh, but it's annualized and, et cetera, et cetera. And I agree with that. Obviously, we're talking about several years of sales versus Call of Duty, which really only has 1 year to really sell. But that hasn't stopped Call of Duty from still being one of the best selling IP of all time. Like, there are so many massive games that aren't annualized that are not in the top 20 that have sold gangbusters. Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring, and Cyberpunk, and Witcher 3, and all the all the football games, all the sports games, like basically all the biggest selling games that we think of outside of Call of Duty, outside of sort of Grand Theft Auto and one or two others like Minecraft. The exclusives are actually higher than all those other multi-platform games. So on PlayStation individually, those exclusives are still selling more. And I would have loved to see the top 50, because I have a feeling that if we saw the rest of the list, there would be many more exclusives up there. Spider-Man 2, Last of Us 2, etc. God of War, Ragnarok, Horizon, Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West potentially. Because we know like Zero Dawn has sold 20 plus million, I think 24.3 million. It's not in the top 20, and I think the reason for that is because it sold stronger in Europe than it did the United States. But I anticipate out of that 24.3 million, probably still like 40-50%, 40-45% at least probably is still in the United States, which would still put it very high up on like an all-time selling list. I also think Gran Turismo 7 is probably likely to be in that list somewhere in the top 50, because Gran Turismo 7, the last leaked number was, I think, 14.4 million, which again is very high. But yeah, it's just really interesting data. I think there's some people who look at it and be like, oh, see, it's filled with multi-platform games. But again, you've got to understand that there's, out of the like thousands of games that exist on the PlayStation platforms, I think on PS5 alone, there's over 4,000. PS4, obviously, again, a similar number. And then you go through every generation of console, we're probably talking about in the region of like 20,000 plus games. And for exclusives to make up so many spaces out of that many games is still massively impressive. Anyway, I'll let Logic speak before I blab on. But I wanted to go into some of the dynamics and numbers behind this, or some of the implications of cost and sales and stuff. But I'm curious to hear Logic's take.
So one additional data point on the Spider-Man 2 sales. So as we mentioned, it clipped 11 million sales in 6 months, but it also, since it clipped so it hit those numbers before it ever went to PC.
Yeah.
And in the months since it hit that number, it has charted on NPD 3 more times, and it has since been ported to PC. So one would think that the numbers continue to grow. One thing I wanted to ask you, Nib, was what do you think about the narrative? So I saw lots of the responses in your thread. What do you think about the narrative that a lot of people hit you with, which is that what these charts prove is that Sony can't sell any games other than Spider-Man, which is based on a license that is, isn't their own IP.
Yeah. I mean, there's God of War, Last of Us up there too. And we already have the numbers for some of their other IP, like Uncharted 4 is at 17 million, I believe the last number, Horizon. So this is a top 20. Remember, top 20 out of like 20,000 games. So, I'm just making that number up. I don't know what the number of games is across all the PlayStation generations. It probably is more than that, to be fair. But you catch my drift. Like, for even any to be up there is insane anyway. But for there to be 4 out of 20 is, I think those people are kind of I don't know, they're missing the boat on this. And like we saw, Spider-Man 2 was on the revenue list. It's probably, in the next few under. The other IP that I've mentioned are doing great as well. It's just Spider-Man happens to be the most successful of the bunch. And that is, for PlayStation, it's still massively profitable. And so I hate to segue into this, but just to give some perspective, right? It's outsold Black Ops 6 on the list. I think Black Ops 6 is... Do you have the list up? I don't know. Black Ops 6 in unit sales is number 11, and Spider-Man is number 6, right? Spider-Man, the first one, has 2,002 people credited to its development. Black Ops 6 has 9,400 people credited to its development. Now, obviously, Call of Duty makes a huge amount of revenue on microtransactions and all the rest of it, but most of that actually these days is from Warzone, not from the individual Call of Duty sales. It's more on the free-to-play and Battle Royale and stuff like that. But so, put that in context, this game, which is the 6th best-selling game of all time, has, less than 1/4 of the budget of a Call of Duty, and has actually sold more. So already you can imagine the amount of margin it's made for PlayStation. But more than the margin itself, the most fundamentally important thing about exclusives is not the direct sales. That is actually just an additive bonus for PlayStation. The more important thing is that this particular IP or game is a differentiator that makes someone pick a PlayStation over a Switch or a Xbox or even a PC, right? And the reason that's...
I was told that's not true. I was told people buy consoles simply based on where their friends are, or where their previously existing digital library already is.
Yeah, exactly. Even though Herman Holst himself and a few other executives have told us that exclusives are the biggest differentiator, and we have the CMA query during the case, where even though Call of Duty was the number one thing that drove people to a console, the number two thing, 69% of respondents said PlayStation's first-party exclusives were the thing that drove them to the system. So if your primary game that you want to play is Call of Duty, but you can play Call of Duty on Xbox and PlayStation, well then by virtue you go to the secondary thing, right? Because it's like, okay, I can play this game on both systems. What's the second most important thing? And that is, according to that survey, exclusives. And we're seeing that play out in these sales charts. So while Call of Duty and FIFA and stuff, they may be like where a lot of people spend most of their time, and obviously Fortnite and things like that, it's still the exclusives that differentiate, not even where your friends are, especially when you have crossplay and stuff now.
That's crazy. It almost sounds like you're saying if somebody spends 40% of their time in a black hole game as a service game and they can play that anywhere, then the secondary criteria that they might move to, or maybe even the tertiary criteria, might be how they're going to spend the other 60% of their time.
Yeah, exactly.
I just thought if Matt Piscatella said it was that they spent 40% of their time, first of all, I increase that number by 10% every week that I keep talking about it, and it becomes 50%, and then 60%.
It's 80 now.
Yeah, I just assumed that was the only thing that was the only criteria that they would actually use in their purchasing decision.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, like again, the data and PlayStation themselves are telling us otherwise, right? That the differentiators are.
PlayStation also mentioned that that 30% of PlayStation 5 owners are new, didn't own a PlayStation 4. Where are those people coming from? Why are they choosing PlayStation?
Yeah, exactly. 42% of the last record-breaking holiday quarter of the 9.5 million, 4-point-something million of them had never signed up to PSN before. So obviously, to them that meant new to PlayStation. But that's crazy. Almost half of the people who bought a PS5 were new to PlayStation.
And the people that are questioning in the thread, saying that, well, this isn't, they don't own the IP of Spider-Man. Well, you can't play Spider-Man anywhere else right now.
No.
So technically, it's an exclusive to the PlayStation ecosystem.
So I mean,
there's value in that. And the fact that let me just say one thing. The fact that it's irrelevant. It's not relevant whether or not a PlayStation created Spider-Man. What's relevant is that it's exclusive and it drives people to the ecosystem.
Exactly.
And people trying to be dismissive are just dumb. Like, that's just a dumb argument.
Yeah. And here's the other side of it, right? So we kind of have a rough idea of the stipulations of the licensing agreements. At least we know what it is for Wolverine. I assume it's actually even more favorable for Spider-Man, because over time they probably ask for more, seeing the success of Spider-Man. But I think from what I understand, they have to. In fact, we know it's more rigid now because Spider-Man's one budget falls below the current criteria. So in the licensing leaked Insomniac data, it says that the stipulations at the moment are they need to spend at least 160 million on development. They already spend way more than that. I think Spider-Man was 300 million and Wolverine, the estimated budget, I believe, is 209 million. So it's actually a lot less than Spider-Man 2. They have to pay Marvel upfront 9 million for each release. So 9 million is paltry in the grand scheme of things. And then I believe licensing, its digital is like 7% or something, 7 to 9%, or along those lines. And then physical was more. I think physical was like 16% or 14% or something. But the point is, like, that is not much of a margin to have to give away to Marvel. Like when you sold, the number in 2023, so it's obviously a lot more now, between Spider-Man and Miles Morales. At the time, the number was like 33 million, right? Just think about it, 33 million copies of something, times $30-$40 or whatever, and they only have to give 7% of that away to Marvel. It's not a lot. So whether PlayStation own the IP or not, they obviously have the licensing rights to it. they are still making money hand over fist with this game. Again, Spider-Man outsold 20, all but one Call of Duty. All but one Call of Duty. And Call of Duty is one of the biggest selling IP in all of gaming, right? Yeah, and it's just crazy. Like for them, I don't think they could have ever even imagined it would be as impactful as it has been for them, especially in sort of curating and selling systems. Like Logic was saying, it's still charting. It charted January, February, March, and July. It charted even before the PC release came out. It's still charting like nearly 2 years later. So it's kind of like almost an evergreen title for PlayStation. Yeah, it's such a moneymaker. But yeah, that is another reason I'm curious to see how sort of Intergalactic and Ghost of Yotei and stuff sell, because I don't know if necessarily they're going to have the same impact as Spider-Man and God of War, but we shall see. But it's such a redundant and pointless complaint from these people, and I think it really shows a misunderstanding of the business side of things. Again, they're not investing all this money into exclusives just for direct sales the way like a multi-platform publisher would. They're doing it because they want people to come to their ecosystem because of these games, and then they make a 30% cut of every single transaction that person makes. Every microtransaction, every DLC, every bloody season pass, and every sale, like from a third party, they get it's like free money. So when you look at Call of Duty on these lists and Grand Theft Auto on these lists, just know that PlayStation is taking a 30% cut of all, or 20 to 30, whatever it is. I think they had a different margin before with Activision, but it may be back to 30% now. But yeah, it's just free money for them. So either way, like it's because of the exclusives that they make more money from Call of Duty. It's because of the exclusives that they make more money from Grand Theft Auto. Because without those exclusives, someone might buy Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty on an Xbox instead, where they wouldn't get that 30% cut and all that free money.
So, that's a point that a lot of people miss about the ecosystem. One of the biggest complaints that I have, we're going to discuss this video here in just a second, because Danny Pena of Gamertag Radio put out a video around multi-platform discussion, and there's a lot of things I just don't agree with in their assessment of why PlayStation is going to go multi-plat. No, I look, I don't disagree with the idea that as Logic and I have discussed on this show, that the walled garden now has maybe some windows to it. It didn't have that before. Clearly, PlayStation's open to the idea of certain games going multi-plat or leveraging intellectual property in the form of licensing for maybe other games. We saw that with Aloy and Lego. What the thing that people miss there is that while Aloy is on Lego, it's still not Horizon Forbidden Dawn, Horizon Horizon Zero Dawn, and Horizon Forbidden West. It's not those games. Those games are still exclusive to the PlayStation ecosystem, and that's the point. And they're being strategic. And the other thing you mentioned, Matt Piscatella was on your on that thread that you put out. Matt Piscatella also debunked the narrative that the bundles of Spider-Man are included in game sales, and Matt said no. One other thing that Matt mentioned to me last week around platforms, and this is the part that people are so focused on the idea that multi-platform means other video game consoles. If you go back, you listen to Herman Hulse, you listen to Sony leadership. Ampere Analyst had an article. They did a summary and their thoughts on the recent fireside chat. And I would encourage everyone to go to Ampere Analyst and read this article. If you could just do a quick Google search, Ampere Analyst and PlayStation Fireside Chat, it'll pull it up. But I shared that article a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about PlayStation putting pressure on the first-party studios to leverage their IP in other ways, meaning let's look at exploring film, TV, anime, like other ways that we can leverage these IPs, these known products, these known properties to and other entertainment mediums to drive revenue. Because again, that's revenue that comes back to Sony, right? These are well-known properties.
So a data point.
Yes.
That ties into what you're saying. There is a gentleman, he I forgot, he works for like a film studio or something, like in the publishing and marketing department, and he put like a LinkedIn episode. I covered it ages ago, but about because he did some work with Sony and HBO basically on Last of Us, and he was essentially boasting about how how well the collaboration has gone, and one of the data points that he mentioned was, he said it's added 2.5 million unit sales of Last of Us 2 since season 2 aired, and that was just within a few months. So, it's this other thing where like these tie-ins, like they have ramifications, and we don't know what the latest Last of Us number is. The last number we got, 10 million, is so old now. But just from his data point, we already know that in 2025 or 4 that Last of Us 2 season 2 came out. Was it this year or last year?
It was this year.
This year, yeah. So this year, like even so many years, like 5 years after the launch of the game or whatever it is, it still managed to sell 2.5 million in a few months just because of a show tie-in, which is tremendous. Like, so I don't know what the sales are now, but I hope eventually PlayStation do reveal it. Maybe they will when they launch a next Last of Us or something. But yeah, these sort of these things that you're talking about, PlayStation keep telling us they're bringing more people to the ecosystem. Movie tie-ins, experimental releases, staggered releases on PC. They are telling us that these things bring more people into PlayStation, but everyone else is saying, it's just to get money elsewhere. But they're missing the forest for the trees. Like, the intention PlayStation is saying is slightly different from what we're hearing on the grapevine. They're not just doing it for additive revenue. They're also doing it as they themselves see it as a means of drawing more people in. Because in the words of Hum and Holst, people don't want to wait to play a sequel that they really enjoyed the first one for, so they just end up basically buying a PlayStation. And again, if 45% of people are buying a PS5 who are new to PlayStation, they got to be coming from somewhere. Like, they're not all just new to gaming. Like, some of them must be coming from other platforms too.
Well, Mel Brooks taught us 38 years ago that it's all in the merchandising. It's all in the merchandising.
It was yogurt. Yogurt tried to tell us this. That's so funny, Mel Brooks. Great movie, by the way. What bugs me a bit when we have these conversations, and I feel like we've been having these conversations a lot around exclusivity, is that they're very oversimplified. One of the things that I keep discussing here on BRAP is that like people are like, oh, it's the old way, but yet their lens of how the platform owners view consoles now is kind of the old way. Meaning, and what I mean by that is, on one hand, you have people saying that PlayStation, Nintendo, we're not going to separate Nintendo out of the conversation anymore. A lot of people do that, which I find disingenuous. But a lot of folks will say, oh, what's the old way? PlayStation, Nintendo, that's the old way. But they're viewing it, and I'm trying to explain this, but they're, in my opinion, they're viewing it in the old way because they're so hyper focused on the console. What they don't realize is that it's evolved beyond the console. It's an ecosystem now. And when we're talking about ecosystems, and they like to talk about MAU, it's not really about MAU. It's about ARPU. We always talk about ARPU on the show.
Yeah.
And
it's a funny word.
Yeah. It's average revenue per user. That's MAU means nothing. Like if I go in and I sign up for a PlayStation account on Xbox and I don't spend another dollar or dime in the PlayStation ecosystem, I'm not a valuable consumer to PlayStation. The consumer that's inside the ecosystem, and to your point, Nib, they bought God of War. Sony gets 100% of that cut, the digital storefront. Now I went out and bought Madden, or I decided to buy Call of Duty. They get that 30% cut. Now I went out and just bought a PlayStation Portal. They get 100% of that. Now I just went out and bought a DualSense Edge. They get 100% of that.
Exactly.
That's the point of the ecosystem. And now, like to Logic's point, I'm buying the merch. I'm buying the merch inside the ecosystem. And so, for that perspective, a lot of people don't, for whatever reason, and this is kind of the tweet that I made a couple weeks ago. Like a lot of these people are, commenting on exclusivity not being a thing anymore, and they're doing this while they're wearing their Nike Air Jordans and tweeting this out from their Apple iPhones. And so, platform differentiation is very important in the ecosystem. We talk about, you look at Apple. I know people are like, well, you can get Apple stuff on, Google, Android. No, you can't get all of Apple stuff. If you want the premium Apple experience, you need to buy inside the Apple ecosystem.
Even the bloody green messages or whatever, they're like, like such a selling feature.
Yeah, I mean, Series on Apple, like it's so the hardware, the CPU, the what's the Apple? What are the chips they put in the phones? I forget what they're called, but
the A series processor.
The A series processor. Thank you, Logic. There's no all that is exclusive to the Apple ecosystem.
Well, and they like to discount the operating system, but we're not discounting the operating system. Like I think the topic of exclusivity needs to stop trying to be chained into this singular stovepiped vertical of a software title tied to a piece of hardware. Exclusivity has a business function. It has a function on the consumer market. It creates a dynamic. And so an operating system is inclusive of that, right? Because you can only use iOS and macOS on Apple hardware. There are days bygone where you could build a Frankentosh, right? And you were still doing that by hook or crook. You were still trying to do something illegally. Remember back in the early days of the iPhone, that there was this whole dynamic that created a big stir on the media about jailbreaking. That it was constantly like these organizations which dedicated like a ton of their time that they could be using to make money because they were making money by jailbreaking iPhones, right? And then Apple's job was to run around and try and close all those gaps and holes, right? But Apple has invested a ton of money in plugging holes so that you can't do that anymore. Boot camping with Windows used to be supported on Macs. It's no longer supported on Macs, I don't think. Right. So there is a and the whole point of that is that Apple values the exclusivity that they build around their hardware stack because it drives people to purchase their hardware so that you are embedded in the Apple ecosystem and you consume from the Apple ecosystem. And yea, verily, they put the Apple TV app on other things, and they put the Apple Music app on other things. But what they don't do is Tim Cook did not say yesterday during the iPhone announcement that you don't have to buy an iPhone. We're never gonna out Galaxy Samsung. So just as long as you subscribe to Apple Music and Apple TV on any platform, that makes any platform, any screen an iPhone. Any screen is a Mac. Like, if you don't understand that, and if you don't understand how that conveys, right, in corporate speak and voice tracking, how the businesses feel differently about their value streams and where they build value. I was telling BRAP earlier today, like a freshman business administration undergrad, or maybe sophomore, your first year in a major, understands and is taught the basic business strategy that if you have core competencies or value streams that are combinatorial and you synergize those, that's a way to drive more business, right? And to drive greater revenue. So if you have a business value stream that is hardware and a business value stream that is software, it makes sense to synergize the two of them in order to drive greater revenue.
So Logic, this is I want to share this because this is a narrative that I'm seeing.
Before you segue to just hold that thought, I was just going to give you one data point because I put out a tweet. I don't have it for the very last quarter, but for the quarter ending March 31st, which is, they have different labeling, but it's Xbox's Q3 and PlayStation's Q4, but they cover the same period to the end of March 31st, 2025. So, you were talking about ARPU and MAU. So just to give some perspective of that, right? So Xbox's revenue that you can estimate going back all the way, like I keep a tally basically, so I have a rough idea of what their revenue is. But their total revenue is 5.72 billion that quarter, and the MAU for Xbox right now post ABK acquisition is 500 million, right? So 5.72 billion divided by 500 million is $10.78 per user, right? That's how it works out. If you remove hardware, because obviously Xbox doesn't sell much hardware, even then it's 5.39 billion and $11.44 per user, okay? Average ARPU. Now, PlayStation's revenue that quarter was 7.23 billion. So PlayStation's revenue was, I think 26% higher or whatever it was. I can't remember off the top of my head. Higher than the Xbox's 5.72 billion. So their revenue is quite a lot higher. But in addition to that, they only have 124 million MAU, right? So the 7.23 billion divided by the 124 million is $58.31 per user. So $58.31 a user on PlayStation and $10.78 on Xbox. So PlayStation's average revenue per user is 410% higher. 410% higher. And even if you remove hardware, it's still 347% higher.
Yeah, and that tracks Nib with I did a similar exercise looking at it annually, and and on Xbox the average revenue per user on an annual scale is about $50. It's about $49, and a PlayStation user it's about $250, $253.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean. And then and then the other two factors that I've been adding into this conversation now that we've been saying ARPU for about 3 years is I also add in, right, and people should also think about and consider our well, I'll call it ARPU, which is average revenue per paying user, right? And this is the really critical point that we drive at with the differentiation between the user bases, right? Which is that, look, like this argument that it's all about MAU, again, just to raise the bar even on ARPU versus our PPU.
But now it's about software is where the money's at. I've been seeing that a lot.
I'm gonna address that in a second
because it's a bit more layer than that too. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Logic.
Yeah. So so the point is 500 million MAU is not insignificant, but if 400 million of those people are standing around in the room not spending any money, then they don't mean anything to me, right? I mean, you can look at, a great analog is what has been going on over in South Korea, where the Starbucks over there has been telling people, hey, please stop bringing your entire desktop and printer and your entire desktop setup into the coffee shop, because you guys are occupying real estate, and that you're not driving up the revenue per customer. We actually need you guys to get in and get out, so we can get more people in here buying coffee. So those people stand around.
That's not the same,
right? Because they don't have to buy a $500 box.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the thing. With MAU and ARPU, right? Like you can't. The executive saying ARPU, it's not sexy. Like, and it's obviously involves money, revenue per user, and to say that in public, and it's all about extracting the maximum revenue per user. It sounds so businessy and a bit too greedy, right? MAU is a bit more sexy. It's a monthly average user, like it's softer, like it doesn't sound, but weirdly, in one of the last post financial conferences, he did actually mention ARPU, and I've got the quote here. So Totoki said, "We expect to see stable growth in revenue and profits from network businesses due to the growth of monthly active users corresponding to the further and steady expansion of the store base. Specifically, we will seek higher revenue and profits from PlayStation Plus and maximize average revenue per user." So yeah, like that, what you said, Brap, it is actually average revenue per user. That is what they're interested in, but they just don't say it very often because, again, it wouldn't sound nice. Like, we're just interested in the maximum money we can get from each user. Like, it doesn't. Yeah, it's not a. It's not a consumer-friendly terms per se. Whereas Mao, you can readily say it. But as Sotoki said, specifically their interest is in growing Mao for that ARPU, for that average revenue per user. That is fundamentally the important aspect of that, of that pie.
And the thing we've been adding into the conversation is that, right, then the point of that is to drive a financial factor called CLV, which is customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
And so the point of having a gravimetric pull driven by, at least partially by exclusives, right, to get you into the ecosystem and get you anchored and to give you a piece of hardware, which is the access point by which you access the digital storefront, is because you then become anchored into the ecosystem. Again, talking about Apple, right? They pull you into the ecosystem, and the hope and the intention is for you to stay there and to spend, for you to not just buy the iPhone, but to buy an iPad, to buy a Mac, to buy HomePods, and then for that to further encourage you to then consume from their services, which is another value stream and revenue, right? Which operates best and is optimized on Apple hardware. So, and all that is to drive the point that, you stay in the ecosystem for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you continue to spend. And over that life cycle time, you as a digital identity within their ecosystem spend money so that your overall customer lifetime value, your CLV, is higher than it is for people going to another platform.
And that's where exclusives and product differentiators play a role, because they want to keep people in that ecosystem continue spending money. And it's that simple, people. It's not. I struggle to understand how or why people are arguing against exclusivity, and where that's the old way when exclusives and product differentiation serves, plays a big part in retaining customers to do what Logic just explained.
But Brad, be honest, right?
Yeah.
All the people who push this exclusives are bad narrative, of which part of the aisle, on which side of the aisle do they sit?
No, I get that. I mean, a lot of it I think is a bit manufactured. Like, you have Django here, who's, again, I see a lot of this narrative. Software is where the money's at. And I know, Logic, you want to address that, but I want to address one thing that Django talks about, which is another narrative that I see. He says Xbox hardware not so good, but it's backed by a $4 trillion company. You need to understand something, that Microsoft, yes, $4 trillion valuation, right? Valuation. They have other divisions that are more profitable and lucrative than Xbox. Xbox is just one tiny cog to Microsoft. If Xbox underperforms, Jago, you better believe that Microsoft will, like, let's say if it underperforms or it doesn't align with, and I think this is kind of what happened and why they pivoted with their broader, like, strategic goals. You hear Microsoft talking a lot about AI, leveraging cloud, software as a service, having that $4 trillion valuation doesn't mean that Microsoft has this abundance of patience for Xbox to become profitable.
I mean, we're seeing that play out. They laid off 2,700 plus people from Xbox last year. I don't have the number for this year, but I saw a journalist put out, I think he said 3,400 now across the 2 years.
It's since the acquisition closed, they've laid off over 4,000 employees.
Okay, there we go.
Out of the Xbox division.
Okay, so the Xbox division, over 4,000 employees. That is substantially more than the average rate, which studies have shown, layoff cutting post large scale acquisition. I think the average is between 7.5 and 9%. It falls significantly higher than that, right, as a total piece of the Xbox pie. So it's like we're already seeing what can happen when you do underperform. We've had already studio closures, studios that have been around before this acquisition for a long time. And we're seeing huge amounts of layoffs in Bethesda, in 343i, obviously. Tango Gameworks got closed, etc., etc. So this notion, and by the way, before that, a lot of people don't realize, but even though PlayStation has been in the gaming business, I believe, 10, I can't remember the exact figure, but 10 odd years longer, they actually, before 2018, had acquired the exact same number of studios, 11 studios pie. But Xbox, after all of that, and despite all the acquisitions and the homegrown studios as well, before 2018, was left with like, I think 5 or 6 studios, right? And there's a reason for that, because they closed all the other studios. All those studios they purchased, they either lost or they closed, or they, you know, folded into others, etc., etc. But the point is, we have seen consistently, and this isn't just an Xbox thing, by the way, Sony too, PlayStation 2, is when there is underperformance, they are completely privy to just closing studios and laying people off. So this notion that because they're a, you know, whatever billion, trillion dollar giant, they're not expecting results, or they won't cut the fat, or they won't trim the fat, and if things aren't up to snuff, they'll, you know, is ludicrous. We have seen time and time and time again, if anything, they are far more aggressive in their layoffs and cost cutting than multi-platform publishers are. In fact, if you go back to Bethesda and Activision and you look at the history of their layoffs and the history of their studio closures since they've been around, they've never seen anything as aggressive as what Microsoft is doing to them now. So that I don't know why people keep repeating that. If things don't go well, then everyone's on the shopping block.
Yeah, and despite them being a $4 trillion, having a $4 trillion valuation, that's why I don't agree with that comment that Jago said. And that's often the narrative that people tend to run with. They're a $4 trillion company; they can take the hit. No, that's not how companies operate. Like
the reason they have made as much as they have is because they're more cutthroat and frugal.
Yeah, because they're shrewd. Exactly.
Yeah, shrewd. Yeah, exactly.
You don't get to $4 trillion without making some very tough decisions, or trimming the fat, if you will, or trimming business units that are underperforming. You just don't do that, or restructuring underperforming business units, which is what's happened with Xbox. And again, it's not an indictment of Xbox. It's just the reality of the situation. I mean, doesn't mean that Xbox is bad.
Hello.
They underperformed and
Zune, Band, Skype, Bing, Bob, Groove, Internet Explorer 6, Kin, Lumia, Surface, Windows Phone, Mixer. Like, it's not like they're shy of closing things down or products down. Like, they do it all the time, like literally all the time.
Yeah, it's a silly argument. It's a silly argument. We didn't say that about Mixer. Mixer's backed by a $4 trillion company. They're not going to show. I mean, no, it's ridiculous.
So I will say, so that being said, so yes, there are, when they underperform, there are consequences, right? But I will say that $4 trillion company, right, basically them having their own personal venture capitalists backing them, right, does allow them to hang in there for longer, right? If Xbox 100%. Was anyone else,
absolutely, I agree with that.
They would not still be around. Right? No, if they were not part of one of the a member of the $1 trillion club, that they would have rolled up shop a while ago. And so the weird thing too is, I mean, Jago's comment, last place in console sales, not in making revenue and profit. Software is where the money's at. If the comment were a little more genuine, then regardless of the disingenuousness I feel like surrounds the comment, like there's truth in that, right? And it's been true since before the acquisition, which is why my whole point was a lot of the arguments for the acquisition were very disingenuous, right? Because even back then, Xbox was second place in profit, right? Despite being last place in console sales. So that's second place in revenue, right? Which they still are. And now the flip side of that argument is that, they were second place in revenue before. They're making more revenue now, but they're still in second place, and that's after spending north of $100 billion in acquisitions, right, over the last 8 years. And I'm pretty certain that they do double-digit profit, because they were at single-digit profit before the acquisition, and then they acquired Activision, which was running between 23 and 24% profit margin. So I'm pretty sure at Intermix, without all of the discounting that comes from taking on the additional overhead and fringe, they are probably operating at a divisional level at 2-digit profit percentage. But to say software is where the money is at, that needs to be understood that's probably true for Xbox because they are a software company. That's where their core competencies are. That's where their best efficiencies are. And they're not a good hardware company, right? So Nib just ran through the list, and those were all hardware things. Well, except for the kid, those were all hardware things that I loved. I personally wouldn't even necessarily say they were bad products, although lots of the commercial market felt that they were, right? But they're not really a good hardware company. That's not the same thing that I could say about Nintendo and PlayStation, who have made profitable businesses with one of their core value streams being hardware. So when you say to say that software is where the money is at across the industry, that's as if you're saying that the value streams that PlayStation and Nintendo have for hardware are worthless, and that's not the case. Like, and I don't believe this whole like exclusives are going away, the hardware doesn't matter. I don't believe either one of those two businesses intends to just roll up shop on their hardware businesses, right? So that they can do nothing but make software. Make software for who? Make software for what? The main reason they make the software is because of the box that they build.
Exactly, yeah.
And one last thing I'll say before I pass the mic, one thing I also want to knock off is this whole revisionist history that exclusives have come about because the industry was trying to train us that that exclusives came about because they were good for the corporations, and then they tried to train the consumer market, right, to follow that pattern of behavior for their own benefit. Dum-dums. The gaming industry has been around for 53 years. For 41 of those years, it would have been ridiculously expensive, right, to make multi-platform titles because they were all on a different technology stack.
Yeah.
When Mortal Kombat came to the Super NES and the Genesis, Acclaim had that done by two different studios.
Yeah.
And they had it done by two different studios so that they could make schedule, because those two different studios were hyper specialized on the Sega Genesis hardware stack and on the Super NES hardware stack.
Yeah.
It's only been 2 generations that they've all moved to that PlayStation and Xbox both concurrently moved to x86.
Yeah.
It's only been 2 generations. That's only been the last 12 years. That is only 12 out of the 53 years of the console industry. So let's please stop having this revisionist history, right? That the vast majority of the industry history has been one in which multi-platform titles in that manner were not practical. That would have been hugely expensive. That would have taken an inordinate amount of time because the programming languages weren't there, the engines weren't there, the utilities and the tooling weren't there, the skill sets and the domain expertise weren't there.
Yeah. Even now, like, Final Fantasy 15, there was no exclusivity deal with that game. It was a multi-platform Final Fantasy, and still they staggered the PC release just to help them with development. GTA 6, they've staggered the PC release. Like, we do still get games where certain platforms are delayed, not because of any deal or anything like that. It's just because of the logistics of doing ports and things like that. They just would rather concentrate on get the product out sooner rather than later and deal with the optimization on a secondary or tertiary platform afterwards. Like, that still happens even now. But yeah, it's so frustrating because, like, I have always been a proponent of exclusivity, and it's nothing to do with corporate bootlicking. It's purely from a pro-consumer perspective. And what I mean by that is, obviously, I've been a multi-platform owner, so it's not the same for me as it is for someone else who can only afford one system. Fine, obviously, for that person, it would be pro-consumer, quote unquote, if they didn't have to buy another piece of hardware to play that game. But for me, as someone who does own an Xbox and a Switch and a PlayStation, I don't care if Tom, Dick, or Ali can't play that game, like, without being bad. Yes, I am being selfish. What I care about is getting the maximum quality for the hardware that I've purchased, and developers themselves and all statistics data, like tech awards, game of the year awards, reception, everything like that shows us, and developers again are telling us, that developing for only one platform and designing your game for one platform ground up around that specific piece of hardware is more conducive to quality, better technology, graphics, production, etc., than making it for 5. And how could it not be? Like, it's the most commonsensical thing. Like, I've said this before, but like BRAP, if I gave you £20 to buy ingredients and make a amazing burger, and then also I gave you another project, another £20, but to make 5 burgers, which one is likely to be higher quality? Obviously the single burger, because with £20 maybe you could get higher quality beef. And
Nib, that's not the same, because you don't have to spend $500 to get a box.
Yeah, no. I meant from a development perspective.
No, I know, but that's the rebuttal people will. Someone
of course,
the live chat later would say that, but no, I understand your point.
Yeah, but for me, it's I don't mind spending that $500 if I'm going to get the higher quality games and production and technology and everything like that. Like, again, like if we go from the 5 most reputable institutions handing out awards, right? DICE, GDCA, NAV GTR, Digital Foundry, NX Gamer, etc. Like, if you look at their annual tech and graphics awards, since they've started doing the awards, 76% of the winners have been an exclusive game. If you go right now to OpenCritic, right, because they combine all the platforms. If you go to OpenCritic right now, you'll see that out of the top 100 highest rated games of all time, 56% of them are or were exclusive at one point. Now think about that. Exclusives make up less than 10% of the total library. I think less than 5% actually, right? But they constitute 56% of the highest rated games, and they constitute 76% of the most technically and graphically awarded games as well. So statistically, if you want higher quality, more production, and all the rest of it, you should be pro exclusive. Now, that doesn't mean that exclusives can't be bad and they can't be shit. They can't have bad technology. They can't be poorly optimized, and multi-platform games can't be way better. But a game that is poorly optimized and poor as an exclusive would have been even worse if it were multi-platform, because instead of the 500 devs or whatever and the $100 million being put on one platform, they would have to be split much thinner with 100 or 200 or whatever of the 500 just doing porting work instead of content curation, polish, or whatever else, and that 100 million would have been gone less far. Basically, they would have had to spread it on more porting instead of design. So you have to understand that yes, exclusives can be bad, but an exclusive that is bad has a much higher likelihood of being even worse if it had to be multi-platform simultaneously instead.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that people gloss over too is the fact that consumers, as you mentioned, do value exclusivity.
Yeah,
I mean, we see this with other consumer products. I don't understand why this is different for video games, or why people are treating. Well, I know why, because again, I've said this a couple weeks ago. I believe this is a manufactured narrative.
Yeah,
because people, those same people that are saying this, value exclusivity themselves. I don't have an issue with someone saying, "Hey, I don't want to have to buy another $500 console."
Yeah,
like, that's fair. I get that. But saying that exclusives are going away or they don't matter, I don't agree with that, because we have so many examples of other consumer products, where exclusivity, product differentiation drives consumers, creates some kind of an emotional connection for consumers. There's a psychology behind consumer behavior, by the way, which I've gone down a rabbit hole. That's the other thing. Like, FOMO is a real thing, by the way. That is a real thing. FOMO is real. I've read exclusivity. According to social identity theory, people drive self-worth from group affiliations. Sometimes those affiliations are a result of buying into an exclusive consumer product, being aligned with those consumers who are a part of that product. We see this with hardcore gamers, luxury consumers who purchase luxury items. Nib, you may know a thing or two about that. No, but I mean, seriously, like I think you drive what, an AMG? Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a sense of like, I don't know, you have some kind of affiliation with a group of people who own AMGs. Like, it's a thing, right? There's something to be said for that.
There is actually an AMG club. They invite you to
Yeah,
tracks
that's what I'm saying.
Like that. Yeah.
But it's like having that luxury, having that things that thing that people don't, that most people don't have. When you see an AMG driving down the street, it's a very unique, distinct looking vehicle, right? It creates a sense of, for some people, sense of self-worth, pride. I mean, I've used a Cybertruck as an example, right? That thing sticks out like a sore thumb.
It's just like the brand association.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what it is. You know, it's the sometimes it's the, if I don't act now, I'll miss out. Sometimes it's
I do think, to your point, right, that is one of the key tenets of PlayStation as a brand, because what they've essentially curated, in my mind anyway, is they're kind of like the HBO of gaming. It's this cinematic, high production, high technical astuteness. Like, if you want that cutting edge kind of game, you know, this is the platform that is going to be most conducive to it. It doesn't mean that, you know, the others can't do it, but that, you know, that's where, if you want your bread to be buttered and that's what you want, that's where you go. Like these Last of Us and, you know, God of War.
Yeah, that's Sony's value. That's their brand identity. These luxury, high-end curated AAA experiences.
Yeah,
with high-end looking hardware, even though I think the PlayStation 5 looks ugly.
Me too.
I hate it. But if you look at like the design, I mean, it's intended. I don't think they did a good job, but it's intended to look like a high-end device. I mean, you look at like it is very purposeful design. It's not. They just didn't slap it. Well, I think they kind of slapped it together, but my point is that they are trying to create a luxury item in gaming where you can get these high-end experiences, have a high-end performing hardware, have software that speaks to that hardware, right? That is what they're offering consumers. There is value to consumers in that. There's consumers that want those high-end curated experiences, want to be in an ecosystem, want peripherals, accessories designed specifically for that ecosystem. Logic, I think you mentioned this earlier this week. I think you said to me, I mean, how do we think Apple became $1 trillion company, right? I mean,
on the back of its hardware and on the back of exclusivity.
Yeah, you know, someone in the comments mentioned Game of the Year awards, right? I think 10 years they said 6 has been multi-platform. I think they might be going by the Game Awards, which is fine. But if multi-platform games make up 95% of the library and they make up 60% of the awards, that's still an overrepresentation for exclusives. But if you look at the global Game of the Year awards from all establishments, not the thing is, like, sometimes
the BAFTAs, the Golden Joysticks,
because sometimes
GDC,
because sometimes these awards, especially the Game Awards, can be more like American centric. But if you go by like the global awards, so let's go through them, right? There's a Game of the Year tracker. Let's go through the last 10 years. So last year, Astrobot was the overall winner. Previous, Baldur's Gate. Previous, Elden Ring. It Takes Two. Right, so 3 multiplats in a row. Previous year, Last of Us 2. Previous year, Death Stranding. Previous year, God of War. Previous year, Legend of Zelda. Previous year, Uncharted 4. And the previous year after that, Witcher 3. So in those 2 years, like, I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the last 10 in terms of global awards have been exclusives. So again, 60%, whereas they make up a tiny, insignificant number of overall releases. So, you know, if there was no correlation between higher quality in production and exclusivity, they would win, you know, closer to 5-10% of the time. But again, they're the majority of the winners. So, you know, I don't know why people can look at that sort of data and be like, yeah, who wants exclusives? Like, no, if you want cutting edge stuff or highest quality, you know, you want your Breath of the Wild Zeldas that are, you know, drawing blood from stone on shitty hardware, you know, that's what you want. If you want Uncharted 4, which even now, and Last of Us 2, a whole generation ahead, and those games still look better and play better than, you know, most of the new current gen only games that we have today, especially the Unreal 5 ones, which, you know, you have some good examples here and there, but it's a pretty inconsistent engine, let's put it that way. So yeah, it has great graphics, but pretty shoddy performance a lot.
Yeah, I want to address this comment here by no House Pro Productions. Games cost too much to make. That's why exclusives are going away. This is another argument that I see quite a bit.
They didn't pay attention to any of what we discussed earlier.
No, I think, look, I don't disagree that games are becoming expensive. I get that, but they are, and I looked into this. Logic, you could probably answer this or talk about this in greater detail than I can. But some of the things that I looked up about the cost of exclusivity is that there are multiple levers that publishers can pull. There's cost caps. There's outsourcing of human capital to bring down development cost. And actually, what I was reading too is that when you start introducing multi-platform development, let's say you're a first-party studio, now you're introducing multi-platform development in parallel. That you're actually increasing the cost of development.
You absolutely are.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead, Logic.
I mean, so just I'm not sure what all the definition, right, and explanation is behind the statement, because that's just a bumper sticker statement. Games cost too much to make. That's why exclusives are going away. The introduction of multi-platform of a multi-platform development means by definition a game is going to be more expensive. That's a fact. I'm not going to argue that with anyone. And so the argument that can be made and the discussion that can be had is a question about whether or not the increase in the expense in making the game, and that's also going to mean more time, is that unfurled by the increased number of sales by exposing it to more customers. So that's a potential argument, and that's a potential case, and that's math that has to be run, and that's part of the risk calculation that goes along with that is part of every studio and every governance system when we talk about greenlighting games. But that's a calculation that you have to make. Then you have to question how much time, right? And so it's a matter of how much you're willing to invest, because if it takes more time, it takes more people. How much are you willing to invest to take that risk and make that gamble on the potential of the sales that you're going to make? When you simply talk about, let's take the extreme case of putting it on Xbox, as I constantly say every week, number one, you're the huge difference, the inflection point in your competitive environment on Xbox is you're now competing up against the force of Game Pass, and you're competing because this is an attention-based consumer market. So you're competing, assuming you're not putting the game in Game Pass, you're competing with every consumer's perspective on that user install base that says, am I going to pay money to go play this title at the expense, at the opportunity cost of just paying something that I've essentially already paid for that's in the Game Pass library? Then the other thing that you have is you have a maximum number of people that you can potentially sell through to, right? Again, this is math. I'm not going to argue this with anyone. If I put a game on the Switch platform, the maximum number of people that I can sell to, right, is 150 million-ish, right? Give or take, where people are in their transition to the Switch 2 platform. If I put a game on PlayStation, the maximum number of people that I can sell to is 80 million. If I put that game on Xbox Series X or Series S, it's 30 million, and that number is factually a lower number than it is on the other two platforms, right? So there's no argument there. And that's a risk calculation that people have to make. Is the additional level of effort that I'm going to put in going to result in sales that allow me to recoup my expense, and that makes it worth my time and worth my while? Let's talk about game investment. Game investment is not just about getting the title out the door. It's about O&M, which includes patching the game. If the game has any type of live service or multiplayer component, then you're further supporting that game. It's any DLC intentions that you have with that game. So it's not just getting it out the door. All those things are costs, and it's not just a matter of making more money, right? The political and religious components that argue for the death of exclusivity, or exclusivity is going away, or exclusivity doesn't make sense, or putting your games on multi-platforms makes sense. It's not just about garnering more revenue. It's about whether or not it drives profit. And if there's more work that goes into it than profit comes out of it, then that skews that profit ratio number, right? And you're spending more dollars per unit of profit that you're trying to crank out of your financial investment. So it doesn't necessarily just make sense to put it over on another platform.
Yeah, and I also think
I was going to add one more point to that as well. Is one of the things that actually 3 different PlayStation executives have said is, for example, putting games on PC, they did not want it to lead to PlayStation cannibalization. They want only additive revenue that they wouldn't have got otherwise, or for it to bring PC gamers over to PlayStation. What they did not want is for people who would have bought a PlayStation for said games to then just go out and buy a PC instead, because they can just get them there instead. Hence, they have the staggered release strategy, which they've stuck to. So the other part of the equation is if they just put everything on Xbox day, then a lot of Xbox gamers may not feel compelled to buy a PlayStation anymore instead of an Xbox, or as a secondary device or whatever. They may just stay within the Xbox ecosystem, and so they may gain a sale or 2 or 3 on Xbox, but they have lost a 30% cut on countless transactions. I think the attach ratio on PlayStation was PS4, was 13.7 games per user of PS4, but that is not taking into account DLC, microtransactions, season passes and everything else, the controllers, hardware, you name it. So they stand to lose a catastrophic amount of revenue if by putting games on another platform, those people don't go to PlayStation anymore. That is actually like the riskiest part of it, which is why 3 separate executives have mentioned they want to avoid cannibalization. So that's the part of the equation. Again, exclusives, it's not just to sell copies of Spider-Man, it's for Spider-Man to sell PS5s. That is why they're willing to spend 300 million on something that is only going to be on 1 or 2 platforms, right? Because it's to incentivize the ecosystem, not just to sell copies of the game. So I think people need to factor that in. When this person in your chat said games cost too much to make, well, it would cost even more to PlayStation if they lost that 30% cut from more people. Say if instead of selling 100 or 110, 20 million PS5s, they only sold 70 million because people didn't feel need to transition over, well, then you've lost 30, 40, 50 million people's worth of 30% cut, which is astronomically more than a few game sales. So, you got to factor that in. It's a whole balance. They want extra money, like obviously all businesses, they're not charities, they want more money, but at the same time, they don't want to capitulate their console ecosystem the way Xbox has. Because Xbox, they put all their games on PC day, right? They had Game Pass, and their revenue was flat. Like if you compare the year that the Xbox Series XS came out, right? The fiscal year revenue, I think it was 15.4 billion, right? And then you go to 4 years after their fiscal year revenue, sans ABK. Obviously, if you spend, 75 billion, you're going to increase your revenue. But sans ABK, their revenue that year was 15.7 billion. So it actually grew 2.5%. But when you factor in that includes the residual revenue from ZeniMax and Bethesda, they actually had revenue decline. So think about it. They launch a brand new system, right? Brand new console. They have day games on PC, which means they're selling to a much bigger install than even PlayStation has, right? And despite all that and the revenue from Game Pass, they have flat or declining revenue growth over those 4 years. Now let's look at PlayStation. PlayStation in that same exact period had 60.5% revenue growth. So where Xbox saw decline 2.5% actual growth if you take away ZeniMax, then decline, PlayStation saw 60.5%. First 4 years when Switch launched, again, 60% revenue growth. So, it's not the case that just releasing your games on PC day is going to immediately increase your revenue. In fact, we statistically, factually have seen that play out, that it can have the opposite effect. Because while they may be getting more sales on PC, they are losing sales from not having the ecosystem revenue. Because instead of selling 40 or 50 million Series XSs, a lot of people have transitioned to PC. And while they may be buying Xbox games on PC, unfortunately, Steam get the 30% cut and Xbox don't get the full whack. And same on the same spectrum, people who get a PC instead of an Xbox, every time they buy a multi-platform game, Xbox don't get any of that revenue. So it's a balancing act. There's a lot of things that PlayStation, Nintendo, etc. have to consider before they just go multi-platform. It's very different for Xbox because they weren't making that revenue. Their games exclusives weren't selling that much. Their Game Pass metrics were all missed. Literally, 2023, they thought they would be at 44 million subs. They were at 25. Obviously, when you add in core, it's 34, but it's still it's a kind of artificially increased number because they just pulled people from Xbox Live Gold. And then in 2025, they thought they would be at 66 million subs. And from what we know, they're still roughly at 36 million. So this is the reason why a pivot for Xbox is very different for a complete pivot for PlayStation. They have completely different business models right now and different growth and revenue and everything else. And Xbox kind of had to change because all their previous strategies were just not working.
Yeah, I want to play this video here real quick because this is what really, this is kind of what's driving this conversation we're having tonight. Give me just a second. Let me play this real quick. This is Paris and Danny Pena of Gamertag Radio discussing their multi-platform discussion around PlayStation, Xbox going multi-platform.
Yeah, and here's the thing though, Paris. The people that are saying it's not going to happen, first of all, they've never done business like this before. That's number one. Yeah, and here's the thing though, Paris. The people that are saying it's not going to happen, first of all, they've never done business like this before. That's number one. Number two,
Logic, what do you think of that comment? The people that are saying this have never done business like this before. Did I lose Logic?
Maybe. Is Logic in business? Is he in finance or something, or corporate?
Logic does have experience managing P&L.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I figured from the way he's speaking.
Yeah. I don't know. Logic, are you there? He maybe stepped away.
Yeah, I mean, I run my own businesses, so, and obviously, Forky is he's an analyst, right? Like a financial analyst, I think, or something. So I don't know what Pena did before. Like, as far as I know, he's a gaming journalist, and the same with So it's interesting hearing him say that to people who are actually in business or in the corporate financial criteria of work.
Yeah, sorry, I had to step away for a second. I mean, I'm sure, I'm sure Pena doesn't even know who I am. So I'm sure he wasn't necessarily talking directly to me. And I have talked to Paris before. I'm assuming he wasn't talking directly to me, or, certainly would be. I guess my problem with it is that there are some people in the space who have, different perspectives that are different from theirs based on actually working in software development or based on actually managing P&L. And the problem I have with this voice track is the opinions of those people, my opinions, have been dismissed, right, on the basis of, oh, well, you're just a PlayStation pony. Right? No, the comment, these people have never worked in a business like this before. No, actually, for the last 3 decades, I've actually been responsible as a technical director, systems engineering manager, software development manager, program manager, right? Responsible for P&L, responsible for AOP, held accountable for profitability in software development businesses and software engineering businesses. I am a software developer. I have degrees in software engineering, degrees in finance. So no, it's not. It is absolutely not a matter of they've never worked in a business like this before. And then the secondary comment of, they don't talk to developers. No, I literally talk to developers every single day. I've literally had thousands of developers be employees of mine. I've led software development teams of 300 plus people. So again, I'm certain he wasn't trying to say, well, that game logic guy, but my problem is again, it creates a narrative, and it creates this pedota tactic that's used in conversations in the gaming discourse, where somebody may come in and have some background or expertise or a perspective that isn't the larger perspective that you see around the gaming community, and those people can't be heard because the console warriors have cotton stuffed in their ears and suffer from tinnitus and can't hear anything except when an opinion is rendered that doesn't corroborate their narrative. Then that person must be campaigning for the other side.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of that comment. Go ahead, Nib.
Yeah, no, 100%. The other thing, like I was gonna say, is we have actually had actual developers and Xbox executives speak on some of this stuff. So just like literally in the last month, right? There's been like 3 separate former Xbox executives, or I think it's Pete Hines, the other lady, I forgot her name,
Sharon Loftus.
Yeah, and then there was one other gentleman as well, who used to work for ABK and Xbox. He was on the IGN podcast. They all kind of shared their concerns about the long-term viability and the impact to content creators from Game Pass. Again, I subscribe to Game Pass, so it's not like I'm saying Game Pass is bad, but I'm just leaning on literally people who were within Xbox and didn't like the decisions that were being made or the impact these things were having financially or on P&Ls or whatever. And it's like, okay, so we've got journalists who have historically always batted the narrative that Xbox prefers. And then we have first-hand insight from people within the business who are sharing some similar concerns or ideas or notions or whatever. So, I know they're doing this appeal to authority thing, like, oh, these guys, they're not business inclined, they don't know. But then neither is Paris or Pena, right? They're gaming journalists. So I don't really understand that like line of logic, especially in the face of actual first-hand data or information or knowledge from people who are inside the industry who are sounding alarms. And with like them two in particular, again, I have a decent rapport with Paris. I've actually had an hour-long debate with him, believe it or not, an hour-long private conversation, because we disagreed on something and we talked it out. I wanted that discussion to be public. He didn't. Fine, I respected that. I'd rather have the conversation than not have it at all. So, it was essentially a debate. And I think that by the end of the conversation, he did come around to my kind of viewpoints, or at least the data that I was providing to back them. But again, I hate to kind of be bad and put Paris like under the bus, so to speak. But Paris like has a history of kind of pursuing or championing whatever Xbox is doing at the time, irrespective of the data and the analysis and expert opinion elsewhere. So whether it's Game Pass being the de facto future of gaming, whether it's about Snap being on Xbox One being the future OS like tool that everyone's going to be used, whether it's about exclusivity, or about the Series S, and so many developers were saying it could be problematic, and he was saying no. He was actually the one who did the interview with Xbox's head hardware engineer, and he was saying, so it's just going to be like a resolution difference, and they said, yeah, that's basically it. It turned out that wasn't it at all. There's so many things like with performance differentiation and I think like time and time again, he essentially pushes the narrative that they would favor, and it never comes to fruition. These things that he said that are going to be the future, the cloud streaming was supposed to kick off years ago, and Snap was supposed to kick off years ago. Series S, because it appealed to a cheaper product, cheaper pricing, it was going to have much more mass consumer draw, in the end, the Series X and S are down on both the Xbox One and the Xbox 360. So, like, my thing is, like, you can say, Logic or me, I'm a pony or whatever, but go back through our history of all the information, the data, the projections we've made, the predictions we've made, the insight or whatever, how we see different aspects of the gaming business, like going and the results and things like that. And I'm telling you right now, like, my track record is like 1,000, orders of magnitude more successful than the very people who are condemning me for having my opinions. So I always say, like, credibility is important. The success rate of your information and projections and analysis is important. And I'm just saying, these guys who have championed things that have consistently failed or not panned out the way they thought are now telling us we're wrong again for the things that we're saying, even though we've been right time and time again. So that, to me, is where I think, like, I know that's a grandstanding, and it's a bit like, arrogant of me to say, but again, like, credibility and the history of your what you put out is important to me.
Yeah, let me play. Yeah, go ahead, Logic.
Well, and here's what I think about the opinions of those executives, right? Those executives didn't say Game Pass is a failure, Microsoft shouldn't be doing this. It's totally tanked the business, right? What Pete Hines and Sharon Loftus said is that, hey, if you're going to do a subscription model, right? Pete Hines' take was, if you're going to do a subscription model, that's fine, but your developers need to know that you have their back.
Yeah.
Right. Your developers need to know that, like, you're not going to come through and hold them accountable for problems that have been created that are really the result of the business model you've pursued.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Sharon Loftus, what she said was, hey, it creates kind of a weird dynamic, right? Like, you're doing a subscription model, and the things you're holding people accountable for and the things that you're encouraging are hinged to that business model, and that just makes things kind of weird from what we're accustomed to, right? Let's think about the scenario of the green light conversation you have about when you're going to ship a game, and when that conversation is around, well, yeah, but can't you just go ahead and ship it so we can get it in the subscription service, and then we'll authorize you, right? We'll continue your funding to work on the game later, and sure, that's a conversation that still happens when you send a game to retail, right? But the pressures to do that when you're trying to run a subscription service, and one of your metrics that you're looking at, right? What part of your telemetry is you're looking at customer churn, and you're trying to keep that down, because now that's a performance metric people are looking at, whereas they don't look at that when you're sending a game to retail. That's all she's saying. She's just saying the dynamic is different, right? Which is the same thing that the design director on what was the machine games game that just came out?
Indiana
Jones, which is the same thing he was saying, right? He didn't say Game Pass is bad, Game Pass is evil. He said, look, the fact that that's the business model and it exists, that the sky is blue, means that I have to acknowledge that the sky is blue. Right? I don't want that to drive every design decision that I make, but I can't ignore it and stick my head in the sand and act like it's not there.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what all these guys are saying. And all we're saying is that probably what seems more level-headed to me is for you to hear that information, listen to it, process it, weigh it and cross-reference it with everything else, versus 30 seconds after it's said, you saying they're bitter.
Yeah, exactly.
And dismissing it, right, and throwing it on the floor. Even though, like, 9 people have now lined up and said this thing.
Yeah,
which, again,
right.
when you take that action, when you make these statements like, when you make this, in Opinion in Paris, you haven't done this here, but other people have, right? Other big influencers, when they make these moves to dismiss things, then it just tells me that it seems like they're being disingenuous, because the gaming conversations that I prefer are the ones where multiple perspectives are presented. I'm sorry, go ahead, Brett.
It's a great. Hey, I want to play this video here.
They never have conversation with people within the industry, and look, we're perfect. No, there's stuff that we predict that never happens, but based on how the industry is changing, and like, layoffs and all this stuff, and now a company.
He mentions based on how the industry is changing. Logic, you've always, and I don't disagree with you, have argued the industry is always changing, has been changing. I made that argument a couple weeks ago about the evolution of the game consoles, how they become these entertainment hubs, bigger than become part of these living, breathing ecosystems. The other part about the layoffs, so a lot of the layoffs, and I don't know if he's attributing to how difficult it is to make successful video games, but a lot of the layoffs we've been seeing in the industry, a lot of that stuff's post-COVID, right? Post-COVID, where the industry had that artificial boom period because everyone was at home. We couldn't go anywhere, so we were consuming Netflix and playing video games. And so, and then there was a lot of overhiring. And so I hate to use this word. Well, the industry has kind of adjusted, right? Kind of gone back to normal, if you will. And unfortunately, people have lost jobs. But also, to your point, Logic, and we talked about this earlier, some of the layoffs too are a result of consolidation in the industry, mergers, acquisitions.
It's acute points, right? And it's a perfect storm of things that are happening, particularly at Xbox. And so it shouldn't just be dismissed as if it's just like, it's just occurring, right, in nature, and as if it's entirely organic. It was overhiring from the pandemic. At Xbox, it's then you converge that with doing acquisitions, which automatically always lead to layoffs, particularly like the bigger the company, the more redundancies you're going to have and people you're going to have to let go. Right. That's 2. And then 3, a huge strategic pivot that Microsoft is doing at the corporate level right now. Right. Which is resulting in Satya saying, I need more money to invest in AI. Right. They're doing another one now where they're talking about now they're gonna purchase AI capability from Anthropic in order to decouple themselves from ChatGPT or from OpenAI. I'm like, so investment dollars at a huge amount are being sought, right? Every couch and penny under the cushions. And that's resulting in looking at divisions and their profitability and, cutting fat where they can afford to cut fat. Like, and so all of that results in a thing where, right, at Xbox, there are certain things that make sense, right? If you're underneath the Microsoft corporate umbrella. And to me, the causality of those can't just be dismissed with a hand wavy, look at layoffs. But when the layoffs are happening at one gaming company in higher density and a higher percentage, right, than they are for the industry norm, then
exactly.
It shouldn't surprise you that there's a change in strategy there. But that also means that doesn't necessarily equate to that's the strategy that everybody else needs to pursue.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right.
This is the thing about their comment that is really interesting to me, because the strategy that they're saying that everyone should employ, or that we are all moving to, is from the very corporation or whatever, the publisher, that has done the highest degree of layoffs. I think now they've overtaken even Embracer. Embracer took the record, but now Xbox has overtaken that. So the ones that engaged in a lot of acquisition and have not done as well with the previously sought out strategies are the ones that have done the most layoffs. And if we look at Xbox like cumulatively for the last decade, from sort of switching to Kinect tail end of 360 and following that through with the Xbox One and having the DRM and all the rest of it, the pack-in Kinect, and then transitioning to the PC Day and the Game Pass and the split SKU on the Xbox Series and stuff like that, I would say there is a sort of consistency of maybe making the wrong decisions, the wrong strategies that don't play out to how they project. Like obviously with Game Pass, they missed all their internal growth metrics, for 3 years in a row, actually. In fact, it cost Satya Nadella himself bonuses because they were tied to them in the financials, and they missed those 3 years in a row. So, and again, we're leaning that the one that has made these bad decisions has the highest volume of layoffs, and has had to pivot multiple times in the last decade, is the one that sort of the entire industry needs to latch onto or follow suit. Where's the nuance? Why cannot not be that PlayStation may be adapting their strategy, but as they themselves have told us, may pursue a hybridized model, whereas Nintendo is, sticking with the traditional model. So, it's weird that the focus, the epicenter of all strategy and the industry as we know it is always with Microsoft, even though Xbox, even though they are the ones who are consistently lagging behind Nintendo and PlayStation, who are outperforming them in every metric, in growth, in install base, in software sales, hardware sales, etc., etc. So I just think, again, they need to maybe recalibrate their thinking and understand there's more nuance and depth to this.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. Yeah, let me go back to the video here.
Companies are investing more money on just development. Like, development cost is not cheap. What makes you think that these publishers, these studios are not going to do that, man? It makes sense, man. It makes sense. What's everything is happening,
Let me say this, and this is a conversation I had at Gamescom with a dev, just random dev. Not that he's a decision maker or anything, just a dev making a game. And just casual convo, he said, I hope, he or she said, I hope, I hope our game does well enough so that we don't have to lay off staff or close the studio altogether. It ain't about, it can only be on this thing or that thing. They don't care, bro. We're at a point now where they're just trying to sustain. You know what I mean? As much as it costs to make some of these games these days.
Couple things real quick. First party studios aren't solely reliant on revenue from the games that they sell. So I just want to throw that out there. Logic, what are your thoughts on the commentary here about the conversation? I spoke to a developer, and again, we hear the games are expensive to make.
Yeah, well, it's really tough to. I mean, I don't want to say it was a straw man argument, but there's no context to that. Like,
no,
in a large part of this conversation, and I'll put some speed brakes on, because I can't tell. It seems like this argument always starts from the third party studios.
Exactly.
And there's a part, right, of the conversation where I can understand, like, hey, what makes you think these studios and publishers, if you're talking about third party studios and publishers, that they're not going to do that? Yes. We know that, and that's not new.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Ubisoft, for time immemorial, has said, "Look, when a new console launches, we're going to show up." Right? And Ubisoft, for time immemorial, has put their games on every platform. Now, Ubisoft has done stuff where they took a deal to only sell their games exclusively through the Epic Game Store on PC for a number of years.
Yeah.
They have done stuff where when a game initially launches, the only place you can get that game is some limited storefront and the Ubisoft store. Why? Because they're trying to drive people to the storefront where they capture the greatest amount of revenue and don't have to share that with everyone. So again, it's a super complex topic, right? And the problem with all of these things is where, it's a polygon, but we always try and get it down to, where it's a limited polygon, right? It's only a triangle, or it's only a square, as if there's only 3 corners or 4 corners. Like, no, it's super complex, right? It's a differential equation. It's not just linear algebra. So, that's part of the problem. Does that same argument apply to PlayStation and Nintendo? No, it doesn't, because the optics are different, the finances are different, the dynamics are different, right? The synergized value streams are different. So, one of the things BRAP and I talked about earlier is, what I've tried to convey to people is, like, if you're trying to understand, right, things you're hearing from developers, the thing that needs to be understood as an engineer is, you go through a big part of your career, larger if you're not a top performer. So, if you're a mid pack, or worse, a low level performer, you go through a very large chunk of your career not really understanding how the business works, right? You go to all hands and you get some PowerPoint slides and you get some numbers, but like really understanding how the business works down to the accounting line and the way the money moves, you don't get exposed to that stuff until typically pretty late in your career. And even then, if you don't have a background in finance, you don't necessarily understand it. But the point is, you don't get involved in putting deals together and being held accountable for metrics and things like that to a point where you really understand, why is it more profitable when I use 3 engineer 3s and 5 or 3 engineer 2s and 5 engineer 3s, right? And what happens when that mix tips because the kids coming out of college are asking for more money, and all of a sudden there's an inflection point where suddenly those 5 engineer 3s cost me more money than, or those 5 engineer 2s cost me more money than the 3 engineer 3s, right? Things like that, and and saturation of direct labor and overhead costs and like they're just not things that you come to understand until you really get involved with being held accountable for putting businesses together and really get part of that, get pulled up into making part of that decision making. When you're somebody who doesn't really understand the progression of people who do software development, from a programmer to a developer to a designer to an engineer, then again, you don't really understand what domain expertise they come from and what language they're speaking and how to ask and which questions are the right questions to ask. So, when you say you talk to a developer, good, not a decision maker, good chance that developer doesn't have all of that background. So, and I get it. Yeah, there's studios that are just concerned about making a game. I think we won't get into it to tonight, but we also have to start putting bounds around what this conversation is, right? An exclusive deal is a deal that has a contractual component to the relationship of putting that game on a platform, right? The comment made here about, it's not about it needs to be on that platform. No, some of those decisions now you're talking about are technical decisions, right? Am I going to put in the level of effort to put my game on certain platforms based on the expected ROI? That's a decision that studios are going to make regardless of what the appetite for exclusives are. Exclusives are, does a corporation who is a platform owner have an appetite for paying an amount of money, right, to get a game on their platform and not allow it to be distributed anywhere else? That is a discussion. That's a separate discussion from the technical decision of, am I only going to put my game on this platform or that platform in order to risk mitigate, reduce my overall level of effort, and when I take into consideration my risk exposure, for my ROI that I'm going to get from other platforms. Sometimes those decisions are concurrent in their combined. It's part of the decision of entering into an exclusive contractual arrangement. But an exclusive deal is a contractual arrangement with definitization around scope, in other T's and C's, right? When this game goes multi-platform, or when the exclusivity deal is over, who are you allowed to publish it through to put that game on another platform? Are you allowed to publish it, but you're not allowed to put it into the subscription service on those platforms? So those are things that are tied up right in the notion of what an exclusive is. And we really got to start bounding the conversation, when we talk about, well, exclusives are going away. Well, developers are always going to decide that they're not going to put in the effort, right, based on the level of complexity to go to another platform. Maybe because that platform's new, right? Maybe because there's other things associated with that. That's a separate conversation, I think, from the topic of exclusives almost.
That's a great point, Logic. Let me go ahead and play the video.
And the amount of people that you're supporting in the studio, right? Staff, all that you got to hire. They're just trying to make sure they get a return on investment that's good enough so that everybody continue to have a job. You got to think of it that way, man. Look, we're the customer. We just want to be entertained. We want value and all that. But then when you do get a chance to speak to people on the other side of this that are actually smart enough and skilled enough to make the games that we enjoy, because I am not. I listen to what they say and I listen to the concerns that they have. And their concerns are not about the nonsense that we talk about on social media. Their concerns are about, let's make the best game we possibly can so that people are excited.
I said this earlier. I wouldn't use social media as the barometer here. You know what I mean?
But,
I think
yeah. But the other thing is, if you talk to a developer, then they're, one of the things that increases their opportunity for making the best product they can is when you limit the hardware platforms that they have to go to. You limit the infrastructure they have to go to. You limit the points of integration and interface that they have to go to. You limit the surface area, right, of testing. So not quite certain what conversations they're having with people, right? But again, it's a multi-factor, multifaceted conversation. The other thing is that the topic of exclusives, right? There, from a business functionality perspective, right, in running your business, there is zero difference in taking a bag of money for exclusivity and taking a bag of money to put your game in Game Pass. They both involve you taking a bag of money for the purposes of mitigating your risk exposure, right, to how well your game is going to sell. The one thing is with exclusives, when you take that bag of money, you also concurrently gain the advantage of now not having to be focused on putting your game on other platforms.
Exactly. This is the point I was going to say about this, right? And this is like a fundamental piece of the context that is missing, right? Obviously, a multi-platform publisher, unless it's like a niche game that they don't think is going to sell well on a particular platform, then they may choose not to do it. Or if they may not choose to do a multi-platform release, if, for example, their development abilities or scope doesn't allow it. Maybe they can't release the game on 3 platforms simultaneously because they don't have the manpower or the testing or whatever else. But other than that, obviously it's financially beneficial for a multi-platform publisher to release on every platform because they stand to make more money, right? But the equation is not the same for a platform holder because, like we said before, they have to they're trying to incentivize people going into their ecosystem with that exclusive, not just to sell copies of the game for that 30% cut, which multi-platform publishers don't get. They get a sale of the game, maybe microtransactions, DLC, etc. That's it. They don't get a infinite number of 30% cut from every transaction that consumer ever makes on that platform. The other thing as well is like Logic was saying, when a third-party multi-platform publisher does do an exclusive, especially on the AAA scale, it's because they have been subsidized to do it, right? Like Square didn't just say, okay, we're not going to put Final Fantasy on Xbox. They said, okay, we'll take that bag of money from you, PlayStation. Thank you very much. You have reduced our risk and, increased the likelihood of success because you paid us 50, 100 million or whatever, and you're paying for marketing, which would have cost us another 30 million. So thank you very much. Like now, instead of the development cost being, 100, 150 million and us having to spend 30 million, well, you've already contributed to a lot of the development cost and you've covered all of the marketing. So not only do we have risk mitigation on the development side and on the profitability side, but they also have the benefit of not having to divide their development studio and resources and staff, etc., to multiple platforms, which is obviously going to spread them thinner. They can just focus on the one platform. And the funny thing is, what's his name? I forgot his name. He writes for Washington Post. He follows me.
Gene Park.
Yeah, Gene Park. Gene Park actually interviewed the developers of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and they said they could not have made the game as it is, at the quality it is, if it had been multi-platform. They literally said exclusivity is what allowed them to do a higher quality game and spend more time and money on the content and making sure the game was as expansive, I think they said, in its world as it was, right? So you literally have developers telling you, yeah, because we were able to make it exclusive, the game was better for it, right? So in every way, it benefits Square because there's a risk mitigation, there's easier development, there's more development focus, a potential for a higher quality product, etc. So it's a mutually beneficial agreement. They're not doing AAA exclusives unless there's a cost subsidy involved, like Tomb Raider. It came out that Xbox paid Rise of Tomb Raider. Xbox paid 75 million for that exclusivity deal. 75 bloody million. That's probably a large bulk of the development cost of the game. So it's not this whole conversation that Pena and Paris are having. I would say like it's missing really important context, and it's potentially even a bit misleading and disingenuous, because people aren't saying like, oh, multi-platform publishers should start doing exclusives and start. No, like obviously if there's a deal and there's an incentive for them to go out and do an exclusive because a platform holder is subsidizing it and paying for it and boosting it, there's a lot of games that potentially might sell more as an exclusive because they have the brand power and marketing of PlayStation behind it. You know, like Insomniac, for example, every time they've stepped away from exclusivity with PlayStation, their multi-platform projects have done far worse. You know, so there are cases, same with like Bluepoint and stuff like that. There are cases where these kind of exclusivity deals that they do with these platform holders end up being much more lucrative for them, not just because they've had the payout, but because when PlayStation has something up on stage, or the brand and the studio behind it and the ex-dev support and everything else, it's just much more conducive to both a higher quality product and more exposure. So I think, you know, it's very muddying the waters. Obviously, it's not going to be the same on Xbox because their platform does not curry the same install or exposure as PlayStation's does. So, but yeah, again, it's just there's so many facets to this that I feel like they're missing.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, but that's why I wanted to have this conversation, play this video, because I do. They feel like they're missing a lot of the nuance and different dynamics. You heard Logic talk about the calculus behind a lot of these decisions. I think they're missing a lot of that in this conversation. I think it's important to highlight some of those things in order to get a better understanding, or not coming away with this oversimplified view or understanding of how games are made, or how exclusivity works, or how they're important to ecosystems. Let me go back and go
BRAP, can I just respond
Sure.
to one point? So in the comments, like PowerPoint said, Square are doing away with exclusives. Obviously, we don't know that they are, but they've given indications that they are, right? Even though, for example, with Octopath Traveler 2, even without an exclusivity deal, they missed out Xbox to begin with and then ported it over later. But here's the thing, right? With that conversation, as I literally just said, and maybe he missed it, multi-platform publishers are only incentivized to do exclusivity, especially on the AAA side, if the platform holder is subsidizing it. There is it's completely possible that PlayStation no longer wants to spend, tens of millions of dollars and all the marketing to secure exclusivity on, say, a Final Fantasy, because they don't see Xbox as much of a market share threat, and they think their first party will do a sufficient job on its own, right? So it's not the case that Square's rejected doing exclusives just because it could also just be that PlayStation is not willing to do the deals anymore, like because Square Enix would never have done exclusives in the first place if PlayStation wasn't paying for them. So again, we need to know the full context of it, right? It may be that PlayStation has forced their hand as well. We don't know what kind of deal they have in the future or for future titles.
Mm-hmm.
About it, and they're willingly wanting to go out and purchase it and play it and enjoy it, and we get enough of those people so that we can now greenlight the next game and we stay employed and we can continue to do the thing that we love to do.
I brought this up earlier at the show that first party studios, and again, I don't know if Paris is referring to third party developers that he spoke to, or first party developer, but first party studios aren't solely funded by game sales. So there's that. I know Logic, you kind of broke that down earlier when I mentioned that to you, because I was curious. Look, there's a lot of information out there. It's just the other thing that frustrates me a little bit when we have these conversations is that there's a ton of information that you can look up. You can look up the impact of exclusivity to ecosystems, how first party that first party studios like Sucker Punch or some of Nintendo's first party studios. I think I put out a tweet earlier today. I put a tweet out earlier today that said, let me find the tweet. Neither Nintendo's nor PlayStation's first party studios are solely funded by the sale of their exclusive games. That's a common misconception people have. There's other things that help fund some of these first party studios at Nintendo and PlayStation. Some of those things could be the recurring revenue from subscription services that 30% cut that you talked about, Nib, that you and Logic have talked about in transactions off the storefront. So it just isn't based off the actual single game sales for these first-party studios.
It's that simple. It's really that simple. So people can argue.
I don't agree with Paris that it's that simple. I think the panel would agree with that. Given the conversation we're having here, the calculus is a bit more complex than just being simple.
Argue that, disagree with that all they want, but those are the conversations that I hear from developers.
And I'm going to take it a little bit further. I think if there's success with every company doing this, and look, Nintendo's always been the last one. I think Nintendo might experiment in the future because they're like, you know what? That's extra money. I can see it. I know right now people saying no.
So he mentioned Nintendo, and this is extra money, and that's part of the argument that I hear too. It's extra money, but again, I mean, we talked about this earlier. It isn't just in the short term. Yes, I would agree. Extra money, extra revenue. And he talks about Nintendo. Nintendo has dipped their toes in releasing some of their intellectual or some of their IPs on other platforms. Logic, you brought up this was what, mid 90s. Nintendo did this, late 90s?
Yeah, the Nintendo games that they licensed out to be put on the Philips CDI.
Okay, so Philips CDI, so Nintendo has released IP on other consoles, the Philips CDI. They have released IP on mobile. But the more money thing, yeah, that is an argument that I hear quite a bit. Again, short term, I don't disagree, but we're looking at long term. I think Logic, you talked about that long tail in terms of spending for consumers inside an ecosystem. I think Nintendo and Sony probably see more value in that than that one-off sale, right? Keeping those consumers in the ecosystem, continue to get them to continue to spend money. Also, the potential devaluation of their console, of their brand. Why do I need a PlayStation? Why do I need a Nintendo Switch if I can get these things on Xbox, right? So I think there's something to be said for that.
But I can see it. I mean, they experiment with mobile.
Oh, sorry, did Logic? Somebody go chime in?
No. I mean, no. All I was going to say is, in addition to the sort of Nintendo experimenting in the past on other platforms, that even for example, like mobile, we always hear about mobile, right? So where the revenue is, well, Nintendo has been doing mobile releases, and they have not been that fruitful. They have actually not earned. I think I don't have the figures in front of me, but it's like over 6 years, like I think it was like 2-point-something billion revenue, which might sound like a lot, but the article from, it was a Japanese, obviously it was translated, so I was reading in Japanese, but speaking to one of the studio execs, they basically were not very pleased with the mobile results, and they actually said they would scale back mobile production because
they have. I mean, they went huge with mobile. I think in the run up before the Switch launched.
Yeah.
And they had several. They had I want to say 8 titles on mobile.
Yeah.
And out of those 8 titles, they came down on the decision that basically 2 of them were really moving the needle. That they really wanted to, the Mario Kart game and I want to say the paid version of Fire Emblem.
Right.
I think that was it. And that was an interesting learning experience for them, because actually the free to play Fire Emblem actually didn't do as much as the paid one did.
That's right. Yeah.
But in the end, those were the last 2 that they decided that they wanted to support, and they scaled everything else back.
And just to tie it back, even Activision, I believe they've now canned Call of Duty Warzone mobile, right?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. So it's again, and we were told mobile, everything's a mobile, everything's going mobile, from these same sorts of people. That's why they're buying ABK for the mobile, and it's again, there's more nuance to these things, and doesn't necessarily mean that just because something does well on console to a specific curated demographic of consumers, high performance consumers, competitive, who want to, on Call of Duty or whatever, that it will necessarily translate to the mobile demographics, right? Which is a more sort of casual pick up and play, while you're on the train. Just, it's not necessarily like you sit down and super hyper focus into a gaming experience. Sometimes it's more sort of free or lax. So again, and Nintendo has learned that and said that, and then we're seeing from ABK as well, they're even scaling back some of their mobile production as well, which is just another one of those examples where just what you see with broader, you can't necessarily relate one strategy or one sector of growth to the console space. Like, there's finer details there.
Yeah, one last thing I'll mention, BRAP, before I let you finish up the video is so yes, they have retired Call of Duty Warzone mobile. Part of the reason is because for whatever reason they released that game and left Call of Duty mobile online, correct, which is actually the more popular title.
That's right.
I think they thought Warzone was going to do a takeover while they were concurrently supporting the other one and didn't sunset it, and that actually didn't work out the way that they thought it would. So so Call of Duty mobile, which is actually the big money earner in the Call of Duty franchise, is still going strong.
Yeah.
All right, let me go to the video.
I can see them saying, you know what? Let's release a game on PC just as a test. I could definitely see that with how everything is changing. Eventually, it's going to happen, man. Because at the end of the day, it's about promoting your brand, promoting your ecosystem to join in.
And I disagree with you. The promoting your brand, your ecosystem. I think diluting your brand, your ecosystem is it's the opposite of that, and that potentially is what happens when you start releasing games day and date on other platforms.
It's literally what happened with Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
how is it that when you release your games on date on PC as well, you see flat revenue growth? Like over your new generation of hardware release. Like, think about it. Like, if what they're saying is true, and adding more platforms automatically equals much higher revenue, then how did Xbox have flatline revenue? Obviously, there's more involved, like sales cannibalization from Game Pass and all the rest of it. I'm not suggesting that, but it just shows that it doesn't necessarily pan out like that. And a reduction in the console ecosystem from cannibalization of, say, PC or whatever, can mitigate the added revenue you make on the PC side, which is basically what happened with Xbox. But to your point, Logic, I don't know the up-to-date numbers. Maybe it's increased now, but I did have a look into it in the middle of 2023, and while Call of Duty Mobile is a high earner, it's not actually. It wasn't nearly as significant as the console side. So the data from ABK was that since its launch in 4 years, Call of Duty Mobile earned Activision 1.5 billion in revenue over the 4 years. Whereas I remember at the time, Modern Warfare 2, obviously this is not profit, this is revenue, so it's not the full story. Modern Warfare 2 earned ABK 1 billion in 10 days, and Warzone at the time earned them 1.8 billion in a single year. So from Warzone on console, they made in a single year more than what Call of Duty Mobile had made them in 4 years at the time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But yeah, I would definitely say the profit numbers, right? Because Call of Duty Mobile on PC, on Call of Duty Mobile on mobile is a free to play game.
Yeah.
All right.
Imagine the amount of people that will sign up and create a Nintendo account through an Xbox.
Well, this is the other part I disagree with. This goes back to the conversation around MAU versus ARPU. Yeah, Nintendo, in theory, maybe could get somebody to create a Nintendo account on Xbox. The only problem is that person is on Xbox. They're outside of the Nintendo ecosystem. They're away from the Nintendo storefront. So what value does that consumer have for Nintendo if they're not inside the Nintendo ecosystem? Where are they? I guess my question is, where are they by having an Nintendo account on an Xbox platform? Where are they spending on Nintendo products? Is there a Nintendo storefront on Xbox?
But here's the other crazy thing, BRAP, right? Which goes to the heart of like why this is all a narrative and why this is all crazy and why this doesn't involve, right? For all of the wailing and gnashing of teeth that that people who are in this camp want us to just talk about games and not talk about the hardware. When has Nintendo in recent years ever said we're really struggling and we're really being challenged to make revenue? We're really struggling and we're really challenged to make profit. Has it ever occurred to anyone that Nintendo at their size and scale isn't interested in radically expanding their footprint? Because as I said, when you put games on other platforms, it's not just the development. First of all, where's that development going to come from? You have a standing army of developers who for decades have been trained to code for Nintendo. So getting a port studio up, you either need to outsource that or you need to build that. You need to grow it. Like it's not going to come out of your natural workforce today without having an impact on your production pipeline. Because they're coding for an NVIDIA chipset.
Exactly.
Right? And they're on an ARM architecture.
Yeah.
So you've got to do that. But then the other thing is, again, like there are business mom and pop shops, right? Mom and pop shops aren't interested in running a chain of restaurants, right? Not every business wants to operate at scale. Nothing that Nintendo has ever said to me tells me that they're interested in global gaming market world domination. Right? So, one thing that should have to be considered, and we've kind of had this conversation at the studio level, right? The people who have been in here arguing that, Obsidian needs to level up. No, Obsidian wants to be Obsidian. They don't have any interest in becoming like the Call of Duty of RPGs. Right. So part of this conversation needs to be given grace also for the fact that businesses have strategies, businesses have OKRs, they have objectives that they want to achieve. Nintendo has never said anything about, hey, our objective is to gain the greatest percentage of market share.
Yeah, especially when they have the highest margin percentage of any of the platforms, and they sell by far the most software. Like they're selling their software in numbers that would exceed everything besides GTA 5 on this PlayStation Sakana. It's like, some of their exclusives are selling 30+ million with a low development budget. And Mario Kart, for example, if I remember correctly, it has 200 and something people like credited to its development. And on the PlayStation and Xbox side, you've got like thousands of people credited to their development, and this little game that has 200+ people like making it. And that, keep in mind that when we say credited to development, that's including localization, sound score, and everything else. So the actual core development team is going to be very small, and that sold what, like, I don't even know what the newest number is. Last time I checked, it was like 37 million or something. That's insane. And that's 100% they're making. They're not. Someone else isn't making the money and they get 30%. They're getting 100% of that because they have made it so that if you want those Nintendo experiences and that brand and IP connection, you got to go over to Nintendo, and they're making hand over fist because of that. So again, like, I don't know, man. It's weird how we, copy the strategy of the one that is arguably doing the worst. Like, it's a very strange thing. Whereas Nintendo has, look at the Switch 2, like the fastest selling console in history, not by a small margin, by it's a substantial. Because I think PlayStation 5 had the previous record and PS4 before that, or maybe it was PS4 had the record. I can't remember, but I think it was from what I remember reading, the Switch 2 had sold significantly faster than even the previous record holder.
Yeah, it's just an interesting take, I guess. And I agree with you, everyone's points here. For me, I just went back to the ecosystem. Like, what value is that for Nintendo? It just it doesn't make sense. Let me play the rest of the video here.
PlayStation or PC version, the account, right? And they can still play Nintendo games. I can see that too, man. Again, they're not doing it now, but it eventually could happen. There's potential. I could definitely see it, man. And I think
100%.
Couple years from now, nobody's going to be talking about this, man. People are going to they're going to be talking more about the games, not about the consoles.
I mean, I don't agree with that. I mean, who's not talking about games? Well, the console warriors. But again, I wouldn't use social media as a barometer around the conversation of gaming. I mean, it's such a small sample size. I mean, I don't know about, most of us, all of us here, a lot of the times are discussing games. On this podcast, I know we do talk about games. We also talk about, business and things like that, or the industry, I should say, and market trends, analysis, data, all the other stuff. But I don't know how.
I think the thing with that, right, is, well, we're talking forever, but the thing with that is, again, look at the actual data, the sales data. Like, people are buying certain platforms because of the games. Like, I covered this before, but in the last decade of full year Sakana sales, as in like the entire year, not just a single month, Nintendo had 33 exclusives chart in the full year, which is very impressive, obviously, like being in the top 20 of every game that's, released that entire year. PlayStation, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was 19 or 20. Like, I don't have it up right in front of me, and Xbox was 4. So the others had significantly higher numbers of exclusives that charted in the full year sales, and obviously that correlates with their install base as well. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just install related." No, because large periods of those charting data is from when the consoles just launched, or within years of when they launched, where the install base, especially on the next gen only games, was essentially reset. So even when the install base has been really small, you have still had titles that have sold gangbusters and continue to sell gangbusters, essentially being evergreen system sellers, including like Breath of the Wild and stuff, So yeah, it's not the case that it's just an install base different. Like Miles Morales, we had data showing 90% of its sales were on PS5. So even if you deducted 10% of the sales, or even if you want to be conservative and add even more, that's still tens of millions of units. Well, I think it's on like 14 million now, 14, 15 million as of 2023. That sold from when the console had no install at all. Like, it was a launch game. So again, like the data is showing us that the exclusives that are charting and that are doing the best in sales, or the platforms that have the highest number of them, they also manage to accrue the largest install. And it's because of that. Again, we've spoken about how the exclusives are the differentiator. If you can play Call of Duty on Xbox and PlayStation, why are you going to pick a PlayStation over an Xbox? Some people say it's just branding, or some people just say it's just friends, but the data is showing us that exclusives is one of those primary drivers.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nib. All right, let me finish playing this video here.
And I know it was very weird and difficult for a lot of people when Xbox made this move last year. And look, PlayStation is doing it too. Eventually, more companies are going to do it.
So, I mean, the PlayStation is doing it too.
It's one title, dude. One live service title. It's so weird.
Well, I
don't get me wrong. I think there's going to be more that come.
But Nib,
yeah,
I don't disagree with you. I said, like, I could see like smaller,
exactly, but
smaller titles maybe coming.
I think the live service stuff is coming day date, personally.
Well, I do think the live, but there it makes sense, right? Because there they can still monetize you.
Exactly.
You don't have to be in the ecosystem. That's the differentiator there. between single player and live service, which people often, gloss over. Oh, well, Helldivers means Spider-Man's coming. What? No, there's the economics are economics are vastly different between single player and live service. But I guess as Xbox is doing but the reason why Xbox did it is different. Like there's a reason why they did it. Like why are we forgetting about that?
Yeah. I just gave you the data, right? Like 4 of their exclusives in the last decade, 4 charted in the Sakana. Keep in mind, Sakana is United States, and United States is Xbox's strongest territory. And yet only 4 exclusives charted in the last bloody over decade. I think it's 12 years I checked. And the crazy thing is, the only one this entire generation that's charted is Starfield, and which released on PC too. So we don't actually know that it would have charted if we just took into consideration the Xbox sales. And the reason I say that is because I believe it was Mass back Pescatello, or maybe it was Chris String, I can't remember which of the two. They said 70% of Starfield's sales were on PC. So maybe 30% of the sales wouldn't have been enough to get it in the charts. I don't know. But then prior to Starfield, the last Xbox game that charted in the full year of software sales was Gears of War 4 in 2016, which is, practically a decade ago. So, the reason they had to make that decision is because their exclusives were not selling to begin with, as the data shows. Conversely, PlayStation has, nearly 20 that charted, and Nintendo has bloody 33. So it's just not the same comparison. It's not the same metrics.
Yeah. Logic, I want to give you the final word here before we wrap up the show, because it is getting close to 1 a.m. I don't even know what time it's. Nib, what time is it there? What, 6 in the morning? Close to it? Nib's on mute.
Yeah, 6 in the morning. 6 in the morning. To be fair, like I wasn't actually gonna sleep anyway. I slept earlier, and then I had some work I need to do. So,
gotcha. All right, Logic, I want to give you the final word here before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, I mean, so the point of the conversation that we've had here tonight, and a lot of the proof points that we've brought up, is that there's room in the conversation for the conversation to not be absolutist, right? There's room in the conversation, right? No, I don't think anybody here has said no other PlayStation game shall ever go to Xbox in perpetuity.
No, we just agreed.
I said I think more are going.
We said live service. I said I could see smaller titles. I could see like
even single player. I think like hybridized experimentative releases.
Yeah, and I think all three of us would have different caveats, right, to define our expectations of what we would expect to show up. And again, even in those, right, as you get more and more granular with some of those, some of us would say, and I would definitely say, yeah, I could see that going, but I still haven't worked out in my head like how that would make sense, right? So there's a difference, I think, in the point of it. There's a difference in that conversational structure and that dialogue and that like Socratic method than the people who are suggesting this don't know what they're talking about because they don't know the business and they don't talk to developers. That to me is a gatekeeping statement that tries to assert an authoritative perspective that what we're saying is the thing that's true because of these things. And I'm like, I don't look, there's, well, I'll just say there's room in the conversation. I don't personally know or recognize any singular authority in the content creation space who holds enough gravitas and enough weight for me to believe either the entirety of everything that they say, and definitely not their understanding of the causality behind it. Because even the people that get it right, many of them are getting it right because somebody told them that this was a thing that was going to happen. They don't understand why it happens. They don't have the capability to decompose it. They don't have the capability to do root cause analysis of what's behind it and why it happened. So my point is, there's room in the conversation for lots of people to have different perspectives and difference of opinions, and we don't need to, in my opinion, put out content that gatekeeps. Right? I would contend, although I will admit sometimes maybe there's some cloudiness in how it comes across. Right? Because lots of times that we're responding because people are attacking us. Right? But most of the time that we come back at somebody like in the chat or something here, it's because they're trying to be dismissive or invalidate or discredit a perspective that we're having. And we're not saying that what we're saying is right. We're saying that there's a reason that supports why we're saying what we're saying, right? And don't come in here being dismissive and stereotypical and trying to apply these absolutist rules, right, to the gaming market or the gaming industry when it should be clear that over the 53-year history, if you look back at it, that's not the case, right? There's no silver bullets. There's no singular rules. The Kit and Christie podcast that I raised up the other day on Twitter, I mean, the Kit put it exactly as I would, which is that there are no rules, violate them at your peril, right? Which means there's no 100% case in the gaming industry that, like, if you do this, this will absolutely happen, right? But if you take risks, if you cut against the grain, if you cut against the norm, then you're putting yourself out there, and you may come up huge upside, but you may also come up huge downside. So it's just a super complex scenario and cases that people are trying to navigate.
Yeah, that's well said, Logic. Thank you for that. But yeah, no, I do want to go ahead, Nib.
No, I agree with every point he said. I was just going to say one final thing, and I don't want to sound a bit conspiratorial. It's not supposed to be, but there seems to be a lot of doom and gloom about the state of the industry, but the data doesn't necessarily support the doom and gloom. I know I heard like Christopher Dring yesterday put out a tweet about the growth being slower on console. I think it's 3.1%. News who said they're expecting console growth to be 3.1% this year. Previous year, I think it was actually a decline. And he was talking about, the lower growth versus PC. And I quoted a point that Matt Piscatella said earlier, where growth on consoles every generation is cyclical, because you have it aligns with the length of generations and new launches. So because we're at the tail end of the PlayStation 5 and Series generation, like probably like 2-3 years or whatever left, if that, obviously there's slowdown and contraction, unless GTA 6 has something to say about it. I don't know what will happen. Obviously we have higher prices as well, but Nintendo out the gate, they have one of the fastest selling console of all time. And PS5 is, on track to be similar to PS4. Maybe it will overtake it with GTA 6, despite a significantly higher price point and despite 2-3 years of COVID and chip shortage related stock shortages. So it's kind of crazy that we're even, it's even nearly level to begin with. But then, yeah, so my point was about that. And then also on the other side of the thing, we're talking about layoffs, this and that, they're really struggling. Well, again, Nintendo has had the fastest selling console of all time. Out the gate, they're super strong. Switch was their strongest, one of their strongest releases as well. A high record-breaking revenue, profit margins, and, with the install. And then on the PlayStation side, again, this is not me theorizing. It's literally what PlayStation put out. In the first 5 years of the PS5 generation, they made more profit than every single other PlayStation generation combined when you account for PS3 losses. So just to put that in perspective, this generation, they made more profit than every PlayStation generation combined. So this notion that they're really struggling, there's doom and gloom, it's not founded in reality. Yes, the cost of games is going up, and yes, there are struggles, and some multi-platform publishers and PlayStation, whatever, there are issues here and there on the live service side, whatever. No one's disputing that. But overall, the state of the business and of PlayStation and Nintendo is extremely healthy. So yeah, so then I think it was what's his name, the current CEO of PlayStation, Nishino or Nishini, I forgot. But anyway, he actually said Nishino, yeah, he said that someone asked them directly, Xbox is pivoting to more of a multi-platform strategy. Do you think PlayStation is doing this? Is literally, by the way, just like I think a month or two ago, and he said no, they do not see any reason to do any sort of pivot right now. And why would they? Because they've literally had now the most successful console generation of all time for PlayStation, irrespective of what the install is. So yeah, just to put a bit of perspective in these things, like obviously companies will always want more. Enough is never enough. Like they're not going to be like, oh, we're making enough money now, let's not do anything else. They're constantly going to evolve and adapt, and because it's capitalism at the end of the day. They want as much as they can possibly make. But let's not get that twisted and try and paint a narrative that doesn't exist on the state of PlayStation or Nintendo or the industry at large. There are huge successes along the way, as well as discrepancies and failures.
That's a great point, Nib. Look, I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thanks for hanging out with us for the last, 4 hours now. So, and also, shout out to Nib and Logic for hanging out with us for the last couple hours as well, especially you, Nib. I do. I mean, it's morning here too, but it's like 6 o'clock in the morning where you are. So I appreciate you joining us. But
it was a good conversation.
No, it really was. And want to give a big shout out everyone in the live chat. Thank you again. Please hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Consider subscribing, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. Nib, I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, please let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, it's just Twitter or X now, I think it's called. Just Nib95, so NIB95_. That's it.
All right. Thank you again, Nib, for joining us. And Logic, I'll ask you again. I don't know if you I think some weeks you're okay with people following you, other weeks maybe not. But if you want to be found, let everyone know where they can find you.
No, I don't want to be found. I'm focused on my making my pivot back fully into the Apple ecosystem this week and duffing Android. So gotta get some sleep for pre-orders Friday morning.
Tim, I've been inundated with advertisements from Tim Cook about the Apple Watch. By the way, I think they heard our conversation. I think they're listening. Logic,
do you like the design of the new iPhone?
I'm okay with it. It changes. Every few years. The camera bump. Look, the mobile market has an obsession with camera bumps now, and that will shortly be followed by an obsession with minimalist design aesthetics that seek to eliminate all camera bumps, just like we did with the notch. So, it happens.
I don't know. Yeah. I think it's their worst design yet, and I'm not saying necessarily just the camera bump. They have like this square section where like the battery would be. Then they have like the flash and whatever the sensor, like two different colors, really weirdly spaced out. The camera, the space between the camera lenses is one thing. The space between the flashes is another. The space between the flash and the camera lenses is another. To me, it just seems really visually inconsistent, and like there's not like a uniformity to it that previous models had.
It was completely changed for the sake of change.
Yeah, basically.
And look, I'm not going to hate on it because I need people to know when I'm carrying my iPhone 17 and not my iPhone 16.
So that bump is the product differentiator.
He wants to flex. No, that's a valid point, because I've had the different Samsungs, and nobody knows.
That's how you have the new one. You got the bump. That's the sign. That is funny. So, but no, I don't mind the bump. I actually like the design of the new iPhone 17. I don't know if I'll ever jump back into the Apple ecosystem. Maybe we'll see. But anyhow, well, gentlemen, thank you. A big shout out to Falky who joined us earlier. We'll be back next week at same time, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Again, thank you everyone with the live chat. Please hit the like button. Leave a comment in the comment section below. And everyone have a great rest of the week. Enjoy playing video games too, because ultimately that's what it's all about. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again for watching.
Makes sense. Have a good one.